The silver balloons floated above the Lincoln Elementary Gymnasium like expensive wishes catching the light from crystal chandeliers that had been rented specially for tonight's fundraiser. Jake Morrison stood in the doorway, his daughter Emma's small hand clasped tightly in his, and felt the familiar weight of not belonging settle on his shoulders like an ill-fitting coat. Around them, parents in designer clothes glided across the polished floor, their conversations a symphony of stock options and vacation homes in the Hamptons. The women wore jewelry that probably cost more than Jake made in 6 months as the school's head janitor. The men checked phones that buzzed with the urgency of million-dollar deals. "Daddy, look at all the pretty decorations," Emma whispered, her 8-year-old eyes wide with wonder. She wore her best dress, a blue cotton one, with small flowers that Jake had found at the thrift store. He'd ironed it himself that morning, trying to smooth out the wrinkles and the evidence of their modest life. "Before we continue, please tell us where in the world are you tuning in from? We love seeing how far our stories travel." Jake smiled down at his daughter, his heart swelling with pride and breaking a little at the same time. Emma didn't see the gulf between them and these other families. She just saw balloons and cake and the promise of face painting. That's what he loved about her, her ability to find joy in the simplest things, a gift she'd inherited from her mother. Sarah Morrison had died 3 years ago on a Tuesday morning that started like any other. One moment she was making Emma's lunch humming off-key while she spread peanut butter on bread. The next, she was on the kitchen floor, her heart having simply stopped beating at 32 years old. Undiagnosed condition, the doctors said later, as if those clinical words could explain how Jake's world had shattered into a million pieces, while his 5-year-old daughter asked why Mommy wouldn't wake up. Mr. Morrison, Principal Wheeler, approached with the enthusiasm of someone who'd had too much champagne punch. "So wonderful you could make it. Emma, don't you look lovely tonight?" Jake nodded politely, trying not to notice how Wheeler's eyes didn't quite meet his. How the principal's smile was just a little too bright, a little too forced. It was the same expression he got from most of the parents here. The look that said, "We appreciate what you do for our school, but please remember your place." "There's face painting over by the stage." Wheeler continued, gesturing toward a corner where children's laughter echoed. "And the silent auction has some wonderful items this year. Though I suppose..." He trailed off, realizing that a janitor's salary wouldn't stretch to weekend getaways in Napa or spa packages. "That's okay," Jake said quietly. "We're just here to have fun with the other families." Emma tugged on his hand. "Can we go see the face painting, Daddy? I want to be a butterfly." "Of course, sweetheart." Jake let her pull him across the room, weaving between clusters of parents who shifted slightly as they approached conversations, pausing just long enough to acknowledge their presence before resuming. The face painting booth was run by Mrs. Chen, the art teacher, whose smile was genuine when she saw Emma approaching. "Well, if it isn't my favorite young artist. What would you like to be tonight?" "Emma, a butterfly, please. A purple one." As Mrs. Chen began painting delicate purple wings across Emma's cheeks, Jake found himself scanning the gymnasium, taking in the scene with the practiced eye of someone who'd spent years observing from the margins. Near the silent auction table, a group of mothers discussed their children's private tutors. By the refreshment table, fathers debated which exclusive summer camps would best position their kids for elite high schools. And then his gaze landed on something that made his chest tighten with recognition. In the far corner of the gym, at a beautifully decorated table, set apart from the others, sat a little girl who looked to be about Emma's age. She wore a dress that probably cost more than Jake's monthly mortgage payment, her blonde hair perfectly styled in elaborate curls. But despite the expensive packaging, despite the obvious care that had gone into her appearance, she sat completely alone. Jake watched as other children ran past her table, their parents steering them toward different activities with the subtle redirections that wealthy people had perfected. He saw the way the little girl's eyes followed the other kids, the way her small hands were folded carefully in her lap. The perfect posture that spoke of rigid training rather than natural comfort. All done, Mrs. Chen announced, holding up a mirror for Emma to see her purple butterfly wings. Emma giggled with delight, touching her painted cheeks gently. I love it, thank you, Mrs. Chen. You're very welcome, butterfly girl. Now go show everyone how beautiful you look. Emma started to run toward the group of children near the playground display, her excitement infectious. But she stopped suddenly, her attention caught by the same sight that had drawn Jake's notice. Daddy, she said quietly, tugging on his sleeve. Why is that girl sitting all by herself? Jake followed his daughter's gaze to the lonely figure in the corner. I don't know, sweetheart. That's not very nice. Someone should go talk to her. Out of the mouths of babes, Jake thought, remembering something his wife used to say. Emma had inherited Sarah's kind heart, along with her joy, and sometimes her 8-year-old wisdom cut straight to the heart of things that adults had learned to complicate. You're absolutely right, Jake said, making a decision that would change everything. Come on, let's go introduce ourselves. As they approached the isolated table, Jake became increasingly aware of the subtle choreography happening around them. Parents guided their children away with gentle touches and whispered redirections. Staff members cast nervous glances toward the corner, their movements careful and calculated. It was as if an invisible barrier surrounded the table, one that everyone respected but no one acknowledged. The little girl looked up as they drew near, and Jake felt his breath catch. Her eyes were a startling shade of blue, intelligent and sad, in the way that children's eyes should never be. She couldn't have been older than 8, but there was something ancient in her gaze, a weariness that spoke of too much adult supervision and not enough childhood freedom. Hi there, Jake, said gently, crouching down to her eye level. I'm Jake, and this is my daughter, Emma. What's your name? The girl's eyes widened slightly, as if she wasn't used to adults addressing her directly. She glanced around nervously before responding. I'm Lily Blackwell, she said in a voice so quiet Jake had to lean closer to hear her. Hi, Lily, Emma said with the fearless friendliness that only children possess. I like your dress. It's really pretty. Do you want to see my butterfly face painting? Lily's face brightened just a fraction, the first genuine emotion Jake had seen from her. It's beautiful, she whispered, reaching out as if to touch Emma's painted cheek before pulling her hand back. Mrs. Chen painted it for me. She's really nice. Maybe she could paint something for you, too. Emma bounced on her toes with excitement. What's your favorite animal? Before Lily could answer, a presence loomed over their small gathering. Jake looked up to see a woman who commanded attention without saying a word. She was tall and elegant, wearing a black cocktail dress that probably cost more than Jake's car. Her dark hair was pulled back in a perfect chignon, not a strand out of place. But it was her eyes that caught Jake's attention, the same startling blue as Lily's, though infinitely colder. This had to be Victoria Blackwell, the woman whose name was whispered in certain circles with a mixture of respect and fear. The tech mogul who had built a billion-dollar empire before her 30th birthday. The CEO whose companies touched every aspect of modern life, from the phones in people's pockets to the software that ran their cars. Lily Victoria said, her voice carrying the crisp authority of someone accustomed to immediate obedience. You shouldn't bother the other guests. Oh, she's not bothering us at all, Jake said, standing slowly. Emma was just making friends. Victoria's gaze shifted to Jake, and he felt the full weight of her assessment. He could see her taking in his appearance, the department store shirt he'd bought for tonight, the shoes that were polished but clearly worn the absence of expensive accessories that marked him as someone from a different world entirely. I'm Victoria Blackwell, she said, extending a manicured hand with the mechanical politeness of someone who'd attended 1,000 business functions. Lily's mother. Jake Morrison. It's nice to meet you. Victoria's handshake was firm, but brief, designed to establish dominance rather than create connection. Behind her, Jake noticed a young man in an expensive suit, hovering nervously with a phone in his hand, and a woman who looked like she might be security, her eyes constantly scanning the room. Mommy Lily said softly, "This is Emma. She has a butterfly on her face." "I can see that, dear." Victoria's response was neutral, neither encouraging nor discouraging. "However, we shouldn't interrupt other families' evening." "They're not interrupting," Emma piped up with the brutal honesty of childhood. "Lily seems lonely. Why is she sitting here all by herself?" The question hung in the air like a challenge. Jake saw something flicker across Victoria's face, too quick to identify, before the mask of corporate composure slid back into place. "Lily prefers quieter settings," Victoria said carefully. "Large groups can be overwhelming." Jake glanced around the gymnasium, noting how the other children played together in noisy clusters, while Lily sat in splendid isolation. He thought about Emma after Sarah's funeral, how she'd withdrawn from her friends for weeks, how he'd had to gently coax her back into social situations. But this felt different, more permanent, as if Lily's isolation was a fact of life rather than a phase to overcome. "Maybe we could sit with you for a bit," Jake suggested. "If that would be okay." Victoria hesitated, and Jake caught a glimpse of something unexpected in her expression. Uncertainty, perhaps, as if she wasn't sure how to navigate this simple social interaction. "I suppose that would be acceptable," she said finally, the words formal and stilted. Emma immediately climbed into the chair next to Lily, chattering about the decorations and the music and the cookies, shaped like books that were being served at the dessert table. Lily listened with rapt attention, occasionally nodding or offering a shy smile. Jake pulled out a chair across from them, acutely aware that Victoria remained standing, her posture rigid with tension. He could see her assistant checking his phone nervously, probably fielding calls from whatever business crisis required Victoria's attention, even during her daughter's school function. "Are you enjoying the fundraiser?" Jake asked, trying to make conversation. "It's well organized," Victoria replied, which wasn't really an answer. "The school should meet their goal tonight." "That's good. Emma's really excited about the new playground equipment they're hoping to buy." Victoria nodded absently, her attention divided between the conversation and whatever her assistant was whispering in her ear. Jake realized that even when she was physically present, Victoria Blackwell existed in multiple worlds. Simultaneously, her mind always partially engaged with the empire she'd built. "Lily," Emma said suddenly, "do you want to go see the bouncy castle? It's really fun." Lily's eyes lit up with interest, but she looked immediately to her mother for permission. "Can I, Mummy?" Victoria glanced toward the bouncy castle, where children were laughing and tumbling together in joyful chaos. Her expression suggested she was calculating risk factors and liability issues rather than considering her daughter's happiness. "I don't think that's appropriate," she said finally. "Too many children, too much activity." Jake saw Lily's face fall, the light in her eyes dimming like someone had turned down a dimmer switch. It was such a small disappointment, but somehow it felt enormous in its implications. The evening progressed with stilted conversation and awkward silences. Victoria fielded 3 phone calls, stepping away each time with apologies that sounded more like business etiquette than genuine regret. Her assistant shuffled through papers and whispered updates that seemed to increase her tension with each passing minute. Meanwhile, Emma and Lily had fallen into the easy camaraderie that children create effortlessly. They colored pictures together with the crayons the PTA had provided, and Emma showed Lily how to make a paper airplane from her placemat. For brief moments, Lily forgot to sit perfectly still and proper her laughter bubbling up like water from a spring that had been capped too long. "Girls," Principal Wheeler announced over the microphone, "in 5 minutes, we'll be moving outside for the moonlight playground activities. Don't forget your jackets." Emma bounced in her chair with excitement. "Lily, they're going to light up the whole playground. It'll be so pretty." Lily looked toward her mother hopefully. "May we go outside?" "Mommy." Victoria was in the middle of another phone call, her voice sharp as she discussed quarterly projections with someone on the other end. She held up one finger to indicate she needed a moment. Jake watched Lily's face, carefully seeing the familiar pattern of a child learning to wait for her parents' attention. But unlike Emma, who would tug on his sleeve or interrupt when something was important to her, Lily simply folded her hands and waited with the patience of someone much older. The call stretched on. Other families began moving toward the exit doors, children chattering excitedly about the outdoor activities. Emma stood up ready to join the exodus, then looked back at Lily uncertainly. "We can wait," Emma said, settling back into her chair with the kind of loyalty that made Jake's heart swell with pride. Finally, Victoria ended her call. "I'm sorry. What were you asking about the playground activities outside?" Lily said softly. "May Emma and I go see them?" Victoria glanced at her watch, a delicate piece that probably cost more than Jake's monthly salary. "It's getting quite late and you have tutoring early in the morning." "But Mommy Lily," Victoria's tone carried a warning that silenced any further protest. "We'll need to leave soon anyway. I have a conference call with Tokyo in an hour." Jake saw the disappointment crash over Lily's face like a wave, followed immediately by resignation. This wasn't the first time her childhood had been truncated by her mother's schedule, and it wouldn't be the last. "That's okay," Emma said quietly, though Jake could see she was disappointed too. "Maybe we can look out the windows and see the lights from here." They did exactly that, pressing their faces against the tall windows that overlooked the playground. The maintenance crew had strung lights through the jungle gym and around the swing sets, creating a magical wonderland that made the children outside squeal with delight. "It's beautiful." Lily breathed, her small hand pressed against the glass. "I wish you could go play on it," Emma said, with the matter-of-fact sadness that children express so naturally. They were still standing at the window when it happened. The maintenance crew was testing one of the light strings, and suddenly a section of the display went dark, then blazed back to life with a shower of sparks that rained down on the mulch below. "Oh my," someone said behind them. "I hope that's not dangerous." Jake was about to suggest they move away from the window when Lily pressed closer to the glass, trying to get a better view of the sparks. Her enthusiasm, so rare and precious, made her forget her usual careful restraint. "It's like fireworks," she said, leaning against the window frame. But the window latch, old and poorly maintained despite the school's wealthy donor base, chose that moment to give way. The window swung open suddenly, and Lily, caught off balance, tumbled forward. Jake moved without thinking, his parental instincts overriding everything else. He lunged forward and caught Lily around the waist, pulling her back from the window opening. But not before she scraped her knee hard against the concrete windowsill, the impact drawing blood and tears. "Ow!" Lily cried out, the first truly childlike sound Jake had heard from her all evening. The sound cut through the gymnasium chatter like a knife. Conversation stopped. Heads turned. And suddenly every adult in the room was staring at the billionaire's daughter, who was bleeding and crying in the arms of the school janitor. The silence that followed was deafening. Jake could feel the weight of every gaze, the calculations happening behind expensive masks of concern. These people lived in a world where touching Victoria Blackwell's daughter without permission could have serious consequences, where even offering help might be interpreted as overstepping boundaries. "Is she hurt?" someone whispered. "Should we call someone? Where's the nurse?" But nobody moved. Nobody approached. They stood frozen by protocol and fear, waiting for permission that might never come. Jake looked down at Lily, who was clutching her scraped knee with both hands, tears streaming down her face and mixing with Emma's butterfly painting where their cheeks had touched. The scrape wasn't serious, just a surface wound that bled more than it hurt, but to an 8-year-old, it might as well have been a major injury. "It's okay, sweetheart," Jake said softly. The same voice he used when Emma had nightmares or woke up sick in the middle of the night. "Let me take a look at that." He pulled out his pocket handkerchief, clean but worn, and gently pressed it against the scrape to stop the bleeding. Emma appeared at his side with a packet of dinosaur Band-Aids from her small purse, the kind that mothers always carry, but Jake had learned to stock himself. "Here, Lily," Emma said, offering the Band-Aids. "These always make me feel better when I get hurt." Victoria materialized beside them as if she'd teleported across the room. Her face was pale, her composure cracked for the first time all evening. "What happened?" she demanded, her voice sharp with panic that she was trying desperately to control. The window latch gave way, Jake explained, still kneeling beside Lily. She scraped her knee when she fell forward. "It's not serious, just needs cleaning and a Band-Aid. I should call doctor." "Reynolds," Victoria said, already reaching for her phone. "He can be here in 20 minutes. "Mummy, it's just a little scrape," Lily said through her sniffles. "Mr. Jake is taking care of it." Victoria stopped mid-dial, staring down at her daughter. Jake realized this might be the first time Lily had ever been injured in Victoria's presence, the first time her carefully controlled world had included something as normal and terrifying as a child's accident. "Really, it's okay," Jake said, gently applying the dinosaur Band-Aid with practiced ease. "Kids get scraped up all the time. It's part of being a kid." He looked up at Victoria, seeing something raw and vulnerable in her expression before she caught herself. "There," he said to Lily. "Good as new. The dinosaur will protect it while it heals." Lily examined her knee solemnly, then surprised everyone by throwing her arms around Jake's neck. "Thank you for catching me," she whispered. "And thank you for the dinosaur." Jake felt his throat tighten with emotion. When was the last time this little girl had been hugged by someone who wasn't paid to care for her? When was the last time someone had simply held her when she was hurt? "You're very welcome, sweetheart," he said, patting her back gently. When Lily finally pulled away, she looked up at her mother with shining eyes. "Mommy, Mr. Jake saved me from falling out the window, and Emma gave me her special Band-Aids." Victoria stared at Jake for a long moment, something shifting in her expression. Around them, the frozen tableau of observers began to thaw as people realized the crisis was over, conversations resuming with the nervous energy of those who had witnessed something unexpected. "Thank you," Victoria said quietly, the words seeming to cost her some effort. Thank you." Jake stood up, brushing off his knees. Anyone would have done the same thing. But even as he said it, they both knew it wasn't true. For the last 5 minutes, a room full of adults had stood paralyzed while a child needed help. It had taken someone who didn't understand the rules, someone who cared more about a little girl's welfare than about social consequences to simply do what was right. "I think," Victoria said slowly, as if the words were foreign to her, "we should probably get that scrape properly cleaned." "The nurse's office is just down the hall," Jake offered. "I have the keys." Victoria nodded, then surprised him by adding, "Would you mind showing us the way?" As they walked down the empty hallway, Emma chattering to Lily about the best kinds of Band-Aids, and Lily responding with increasing animation. Jake caught Victoria looking at him with an expression he couldn't quite read. It wasn't the calculating assessment from earlier, or the polite distance of someone acknowledging a service worker. It was something more like curiosity, as if she was seeing him clearly for the first time. The nurse's office smelled like antiseptic and the lingering sweetness of children's cough drops. Jake unlocked the door and flipped on the fluorescent lights, revealing a space that was functionally sterile but decorated with cheerful posters about hand-washing and healthy eating. "I help Mrs. Patterson sometimes when kids get hurt during recess," Jake explained as he gathered supplies from the well-stocked first aid cabinet. "Nothing serious, just the usual playground injuries." Victoria stood in the doorway, looking distinctly uncomfortable in the small utilitarian space. This wasn't her world of boardrooms and executive suites. Here there were no assistants to handle details, no protocols to follow, except basic human kindness. Daddy, Emma said, settling onto the examination stool beside Lily. "Can you tell Lily about the time I fell off my bike and got a really big scrape?" "Oh, that was a memorable day," Jake said, warming a damp cloth under the faucet. Emma decided she was ready to ride without training wheels, but she forgot to mention this to me until after she'd already taken off down the hill. Lily's eyes widened. "Did it hurt very much?" "Like crazy," Emma said cheerfully. "But Daddy cleaned it up and put on 3 Band-Aids and made me hot chocolate with extra marshmallows." "The marshmallows are very important," Jake added solemnly, beginning to gently clean Lily's scrape. "They have healing properties." For the first time since they'd met, Lily giggled. It was a small sound, quickly stifled, but genuine. Jake glanced at Victoria and saw her staring at her daughter with an expression of such longing that it took his breath away. "There we go," Jake said, applying antibiotic ointment with gentle fingers. "Much better. Emma, do you want to do the honors with the new Band-Aid?" Emma carefully placed a fresh dinosaur Band-Aid over the scrape, smoothing the edges with the seriousness of a surgeon. "This one's a triceratops," she informed Lily. "They're really good at protecting things." "Thank you," Lily said softly. Then, even more quietly, "I've never had a dinosaur Band-Aid before." The simple statement hung in the air, heavy with implication. Jake found himself wondering what kind of childhood this little girl had been living, surrounded by luxury, but lacking the small comforts that most kids took for granted. "Well," he said lightly, "now you have a whole collection to choose from. Emma always carries them just in case." Victoria's assistant appeared in the doorway, phone in hand, as always. "Ms. Blackwell, I'm sorry to interrupt, but the Tokyo call has been moved up. They need you online in 15 minutes. Jake saw the familiar tension creep back into Victoria's shoulders, the way her hand automatically reached for her own phone. The corporate world was calling, demanding her immediate attention, pulling her back into the space where she was powerful and in control. "Of course," Victoria said, her voice shifting back into business mode. "Tell them I'll be online in 10 minutes. She looked down at Lily, and Jake caught a glimpse of internal struggle crossing her face. "We should go home now, sweetheart. You have tutoring early tomorrow morning." Lily's face fell, but she nodded obediently. "Yes, Mummy." "Wait," Emma said suddenly, reaching into her small purse. "Lily, you should take some extra Band-Aids home with you, just in case you get another scrape." She pressed a small packet of dinosaur Band-Aids into Lily's hand, the kind of generous gesture that children make without thinking about the value of what they're giving away. "Thank you, Emma," Lily whispered, clutching the Band-Aids like they were made of gold. "These are the best present I've ever gotten." Jake felt his heart break a little. The best present she'd ever gotten was a 50-cent packet of cartoon Band-Aids. Victoria's expression softened as she watched the interaction. "That's very kind of you, Emma. What do you say?" "Lily." "Thank you so much," Lily said formally, then added with more feeling, "I hope I see you again soon." "Maybe we could have a play date sometime," Emma suggested, with the casual confidence of a child who had never been told that social boundaries might prevent such things. Victoria hesitated, and Jake could practically see the calculations happening behind her eyes. Playdates meant scheduling, meant bringing their different worlds into contact, meant complications that her tightly controlled life wasn't designed to handle. Perhaps she said carefully the word neither a yes nor a no. As they walked back toward the gymnasium to collect Victoria's things, Jake found himself studying the interaction between mother and daughter. Victoria's love for Lily was obvious, but it was wrapped in so many layers of protection and control that it seemed almost impossible to reach. She touched Lily's shoulder to guide her, but it was the touch of someone handling something precious and fragile, not the casual physical affection that Jake shared with Emma. In the parking lot, Victoria's driver was waiting beside a sleek black sedan that probably cost more than Jake would make in 5 years. The man opened the door with professional efficiency, but Jake noticed the way his eyes softened when he smiled at Lily. "Good evening, Miss Lily," he said warmly. "How was the school party?" "I hurt my knee, but Mr. Jake took care of it," Lily said, showing off her dinosaur band-aid with obvious pride. "And Emma gave me extras to take home." The driver's eyes met Jake's briefly, and there was something like gratitude in his expression. "That was very kind," he said. "Mr. Jake sounds like a good person." Victoria paused in the act of checking her phone, something in the driver's simple statement seeming to catch her attention. She looked at Jake with that unreadable expression again. "Yes," she said quietly. "He is." As Lily climbed into the car, she pressed her face against the window and waved at Emma and Jake. Her small hand left a fog print on the glass, a child's mark on the perfect surface. "Bye, Emma." "Jake," Emma waved back enthusiastically. "Bye, Lily. I hope your knee feels better." The sedan pulled away, red taillights disappearing into the night, leaving Jake and Emma standing alone in the nearly empty parking lot. Around them, other families were loading tired children into minivans and SUVs, the evening ending with the usual chaos of finding lost jackets and organizing forgotten school bags. "Daddy," Emma said as they walked toward their old Honda. Lily seemed really lonely. "Yeah, sweetheart, I think she was. Why don't other kids want to play with her? She's really nice." Jake helped Emma into her car seat, considering how to answer. "How do you explain to an 8-year-old that sometimes adults create barriers that children don't understand, that wealth and power can isolate as much as they protect?" "Sometimes," he said carefully, "people get scared of other people who seem different from them. Lily's family has a lot of money, and that makes some people nervous about how to act around them." Emma frowned, buckling her seatbelt. "That's silly. Money doesn't make you different on the inside." "You're absolutely right," Jake said, starting the car. "It doesn't." As they drove home through the quiet suburban streets, Emma chatted about the evening, but Jake found his mind drifting back to Victoria Blackwell. There had been something in her eyes when she looked at her daughter, a hunger that spoke of someone who had everything except what mattered most. He thought about the way she'd hesitated when Emma suggested a playdate, as if the idea was both appealing and terrifying. He thought about Lily's careful politeness, the way she'd asked permission for everything, the joy that had broken through when someone simply treated her like a normal kid. Most of all, he thought about that moment when Lily had hugged him, the desperate gratitude of a child who was rarely held without reason. Jake didn't expect to hear from Victoria Blackwell again. The world she inhabited was so far removed from his own that their encounter at the school seemed like a surreal dream, the kind of thing that happens once and is filed away as an interesting story to tell at dinner parties he didn't attend. So when his phone rang 3 days later and an unfamiliar voice identified herself as Ms. Blackwell's assistant, Jake assumed it was some kind of mistake. "I'm sorry," he said, Emma chattering in the background as she built a fort out of couch cushions. "Ms. Blackwell's assistant." "Are you sure you have the right number, Mr. Morrison? This is Jennifer Chen from Victoria Blackwell's office. Ms. Blackwell asked me to call you regarding a possible playdate for Lily." Jake nearly dropped the phone. "A playdate?" "Yes, sir. Lily has been asking about Emma quite persistently since Friday evening. Ms. Blackwell wondered if you might be free this Saturday afternoon." Jake looked around his modest living room, taking in the mismatched furniture and Emma's toys scattered across the coffee table. He tried to imagine Victoria Blackwell in this space, with its worn carpet and the crayon marks on the wall that he'd never quite managed to scrub clean. "Yes, we'd be happy to have Lily over," he said finally. "But you should know we're pretty casual here. Nothing fancy. That's perfectly fine, Mr. Morrison. Ms. Blackwell actually thinks that might be beneficial for Lily. After they'd arranged the details, Jake hung up the phone and stared at it for a long moment. Then Emma appeared beside him, having abandoned her fort construction. Who was that, Daddy? That was someone calling about Lily. She wants to come over and play on Saturday. Emma's face lit up like Christmas morning. Really? Lily's coming here? That's so exciting. Can we make cookies and show her my room? Oh, and we have to introduce her to Mr. Whiskers. Mr. Whiskers was their elderly tabby cat, who had the personality of a grumpy old man and the hunting skills of a couch cushion. Jake smiled at Emma's enthusiasm, but he couldn't shake the feeling that he was about to be in way over his head. Saturday arrived with unseasonable warmth for October, and Jake spent the morning trying to make their home presentable without changing its essential character. He vacuumed the living room, organized Emma's toys, and made sure there were fresh towels in the bathroom. But he left Emma's artwork on the refrigerator and didn't try to hide the stack of library books on the kitchen counter or the basket of laundry waiting to be folded. This was their home, their life. If Victoria Blackwell couldn't accept that, then perhaps this playdate wasn't meant to be. At exactly 2 o'clock, a sleek black sedan pulled into their driveway. Jake watched through the front window as not just Victoria and Lily emerged, but also the driver, a woman who was clearly security personnel, and the same young assistant from the school fundraiser. She brought an entourage, Jake murmured to himself. Emma pressed her face against the window beside him. Wow, that's a fancy car. Do you think it has a TV inside? The procession approached their front door with the kind of careful choreography that suggested this was not Victoria's first visit to unfamiliar territory. The security woman positioned herself where she could see both the house and the street, while the assistant hung back with a phone and tablet ready. Jake opened the door before they could knock, offering his most welcoming smile. Hi, Lily. Hi, Ms. Blackwell. Come on in. Lily practically bounced on her toes with excitement, a far cry from the carefully composed child from the fundraiser. Hi, Mr. Jake. Hi, Emma. This is your house. It's so pretty. Victoria followed more slowly, her designer jeans and cashmere sweater clearly chosen for their casual elegance, but somehow making her look even more out of place than her business attire would have. Her eyes took in everything: the family photos on the mantel, the well-worn furniture, the general sense of a home that was lived in rather than displayed. Thank you for having us, she said, her tone polite but uncertain. Thank you for coming. Emma's been excited all week. Emma had already grabbed Lily's hand and was pulling her toward the living room. Come see what I built. It's a fort, but it's also a spaceship, and Mr. Whiskers is the captain, except he's sleeping right now because he's really old. Jake turned to Victoria, who was standing in his entryway like she wasn't sure what to do with herself. Behind her, the assistant was typing something on his phone while trying to look inconspicuous. Can I get you some coffee? Jake offered. Or water. I'm afraid I don't have much in the way of fancy drinks. Coffee would be wonderful, Victoria said, then seemed to remember her support staff. Jennifer, why don't you and Marcus wait in the car? I'll call if we need anything. The assistant looked uncomfortable with this suggestion. Are you sure, Ms. Blackwell? What if there are calls they can wait? Victoria said the words, seeming to surprise her as much as they did her assistant. After the entourage retreated to the sedan, Victoria followed Jake into the kitchen. She perched on the edge of one of his mismatched chairs, looking like she might flee at any moment. I have to admit, she said, watching him measure coffee grounds, I wasn't sure how to do this. Do what, a playdate? I don't think Lily's ever had one. Not like this. Jake paused in his coffee preparation. What does she usually do for fun? Victoria's absence was telling. She has tutors, piano lessons, art instruction, swimming lessons with a private coach. But no time to just be a kid. I thought I was giving her opportunities, Victoria said quietly. The best of everything, every advantage. From the living room came the sound of children's laughter, genuine and unreserved. Through the doorway, Jake could see Emma and Lily crawling through the cushion fort, with Mr. Whiskers finally deigning to investigate this invasion of his territory. "She sounds happy," Jake observed. Victoria's face softened. "She does. I can't remember the last time I heard her laugh like that." They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, drinking coffee and listening to the girls play. Victoria seemed to be studying the kitchen, taking in the children's drawings held to the refrigerator, with magnets the grocery list scrawled on a notepad. The general organized chaos of a single parent's life. "How do you do it?" she asked suddenly. "Do what? Make it look so easy. Being a parent. I have every resource in the world, and I feel like I'm failing her constantly. You're doing this alone, and Emma seems so confident, so happy." Jake thought about the sleepless nights after Sarah died, the times he'd cried in the shower because he didn't know if he was doing anything right, the constant fear that he wasn't enough for Emma. "I don't think any of us know what we're doing," he said honestly. "I just try to show up and hope for the best. Show up. Be present. Listen to her. Let her know that she matters more than anything else in the world." Victoria stared into her coffee cup. "I love her so much it terrifies me. But I don't know how to be the mother she deserves." Before Jake could respond, Emma appeared in the kitchen doorway. "Daddy, can Lily and I make cookies? We want to make the kind with chocolate chips that spell out words." "I think that sounds like a great idea," Jake said already, reaching for the mixing bowls. "What do you want them to spell?" "Friends," Emma said decisively. "In really big letters." The cookie-making project turned into exactly the kind of joyful disaster that happens when two 8-year-olds are given access to flour and enthusiasm. Within minutes, there was more cookie dough on the girls than in the bowl, and the kitchen counter looked like a baking explosion had occurred. Victoria watched the chaos with growing amazement. At first, she'd tried to help by keeping things organized, wiping up spills before they could spread, and suggesting more efficient mixing techniques. But gradually, she found herself simply observing the pure joy of children being allowed to be messy and imperfect. "Lily, you have flour in your hair," she said, reaching out to brush it away. "It's okay, Mommy," Lily said, grinning with chocolate on her teeth. "Emma says that's how you know you're having fun." Jake was stationed at the stove, ostensibly supervising, but mostly just enjoying the show. The first rule of cooking with kids, he told Victoria, is to accept that everything will be covered in ingredients by the end. "But it's so messy," Victoria said, though her tone had shifted from concern to wonder. "The best things usually are," Jake replied. When the first batch of cookies came out of the oven, the letters were wobbly and uneven. Nothing like the perfect treats that Lily was used to receiving from her family's professional chef. But when she bit into her R from Friends, her face lit up with satisfaction. "I made this," she announced to the room. "I actually made it myself." "It's delicious," Victoria said, and meant it. The cookie was slightly burnt on one edge and underbaked in the middle, but it tasted like childhood and accomplishment. As the afternoon progressed, Jake watched Victoria slowly relax. She sat on his living room floor, something he couldn't imagine her doing in her own home, and let Lily teach her how to play Emma's favorite board game. When Mr. Whiskers finally emerged from his nap and deemed the visitors worthy of attention, Victoria actually laughed when the ancient cat decided to claim her lap as his new throne. "He likes you," Emma observed. "Mr. Whiskers doesn't usually like new people." "Daddy says it's because he's set in his ways," like his owner Jake added with a grin. The girls convinced the adults to play hide-and-seek, which led to the discovery that Victoria Blackwell, Billionaire CEO, was surprisingly good at finding creative hiding spots in a modest ranch house. When Lily found her squeezed into the coat closet, she collapsed into giggles. "Mommy, you look so funny. Your hair is all messy." Victoria reached up self-consciously to smooth her hair. then stopped. Let it be messy, she thought. Let it be human. As the day wore on, Akers found himself having actual conversations with Victoria, not the careful small talk he'd expected. They talked about parenthood, about loss, about the challenge of raising children in a world that often seemed designed to complicate the simple act of loving them. Emma's very lucky to have you, Victoria said, as they watched the girls build an elaborate castle out of blocks and couch cushions. I'm the lucky one, Jake replied. After Sarah died, I thought my life was over. Emma saved me. She gave me a reason to keep going when everything else felt impossible. Victoria was quiet for a moment. I've been so focused on giving Lily everything I never had that I think I forgot to give her what she actually needs, which is time, attention, the freedom to be imperfect. The afternoon ended too soon, with Lily reluctant to leave and Emma begging for another playdate soon. As Victoria gathered her things, Jake noticed how different she looked from the woman who had arrived hours earlier. Her hair was indeed messy from hiding in the closet, her designer jeans had cookie dough stains, and there was a smudge of chocolate on her cheek that no one had bothered to mention. She looked real, Jake thought. She looked like a mother instead of a CEO. Thank you, Victoria said at the door. This was wonderful. I can't remember the last time I spent an afternoon just enjoying my daughter's company without thinking about work. You're welcome here any time, Jake said, and meant it. As they walked toward the waiting sedan, Lily suddenly ran back and threw her arms around Jake's waist. Thank you for the best day ever, Mr. Jake. You're the nicest grown-up I know. Over Lily's head, Jake caught Victoria's eye and saw something raw and grateful in her expression. I'll call you, she said quietly, for another play date. If that's okay. More than okay. After they drove away, Emma helped Jake clean up the remnants of their afternoon. Cookie crumbs, scattered toys, and the lingering scent of vanilla in the kitchen. I really like Lily, Emma said as they loaded the dishwasher together. And her mommy seems nicer than she did at school. People are often different once you get to know them, Jake said. Are we going to be friends with them now? Real friends? Jake thought about Victoria's transformation over the course of the afternoon, about the way she'd looked at her daughter with new eyes, about the vulnerability he'd glimpsed beneath her carefully constructed armor. I think so, sweetheart. I really think so. That night, after Emma was asleep, Jake found himself thinking about the woman who had sat on his living room floor and let his elderly cat claim her lap. The same woman who commanded boardrooms and built empires had spent the afternoon learning that love was messier and more wonderful than any business plan could account for. His phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. Thank you for today. Lily hasn't stopped talking about Emma and the cookies and how much fun she had. I haven't seen her this happy in maybe ever. Victoria. Jake smiled as he typed back, Thank you for letting her be a kid. Same time next week. The response came quickly. We'll be there. And Victoria, not Ms. Blackwell. I think we're past formalities now. Good night, Victoria. Good night, Jake. And thank you again. For everything. As Jake turned off the lights and headed to bed, he couldn't shake the feeling that something significant had shifted today. Not just for Lily, who had experienced the simple joy of being a normal child for an afternoon, but for Victoria, who had remembered what it meant to be present in her own life. Sometimes the most important changes happen quietly in kitchens, covered with flour and living rooms filled with laughter. Sometimes revolution looks like a billionaire sitting on a second-hand couch watching her daughter be happy. 3 weeks into their weekly playdates, Victoria Blackwell's carefully balanced world began to crumble. It started with a phone call at 5:30 on a Tuesday morning, the kind of call that CEOs learn to fear above all others. Victoria. We have a problem, said David Chen, her chief financial officer. his usual calm replaced by barely controlled panic. The Yamamoto acquisition is falling apart. They're backing out, citing concerns about our family entertainment division's profitability. Victoria sat up in bed, immediately alert despite the early hour. The Yamamoto deal was supposed to be the capstone of her expansion into Asian markets, a $2 billion acquisition that would cement Blackwell Industries' position as a global leader in technology and entertainment. What kind of concerns, she asked, already reaching for her laptop. They're saying our children's programming isn't generating sufficient revenue streams. They want to renegotiate the entire package, essentially gutting the deal. By 6 a.m., Victoria was in her home office, still in her pajamas, fielding calls from lawyers, board members, and international partners. The crisis was worse than David had initially indicated. Not only were the Japanese partners threatening to withdraw, but word had leaked to the financial press, sending Blackwell Industries stock into a downward spiral that wouldn't stabilize until the market opened. "We need you here," said Margaret Walsh, her chief operating officer, during an emergency conference call. "The board is meeting at 8. The press is calling for statements. And frankly, Victoria, your investors are starting to panic." Victoria glanced at the clock. 7:15. In 45 minutes, she was supposed to pick up Jake and Emma for Lily's school play, the autumn production of The Enchanted Forest, where Lily was playing a woodland fairy. It was the first school event that Victoria had committed to attending, the first time she'd put her daughter's schedule ahead of her company's needs. "I'll be there," she told Margaret, the words tasting bitter in her mouth. Upstairs, she could hear Lily getting ready, her excited chatter floating down the hallway as she practiced her fairy lines one more time. Victoria had spent 3 evenings helping her daughter memorize the script, sitting on Lily's bed, while they read through the simple dialogue together. It had been one of the most peaceful experiences of Victoria's adult life. At 7:30, Victoria climbed the stairs to Lily's room, each step feeling heavier than the last. She found her daughter standing in front of the full-length mirror, admiring her fairy costume with the kind of pure joy that only children can access. "Mummy, look!" Lily spun around her gossamer wings, catching the morning light. "Do I look like a real fairy?" "You look beautiful, sweetheart," Victoria said, and meant it. Lily had been transformed by these weeks of normal childhood experiences, growing more confident, more expressive, more genuinely happy than Victoria had ever seen her. "Are you excited to see the play?" Lily asked, settling onto her bed to put on her sparkly fairy shoes. "I practiced my lines so many times. I can't wait for you and Mr. Jake and Emma to see me on stage." Victoria's heart clenched. "Lily, I need to talk to you about something important." Something in her tone made Lily look up, her joy flickering like a candle in the wind. "What's wrong, Mommy?" "There's a problem at work, a very big one. I need to go to the office to fix it." "But what about my play?" "I'm sorry, sweetheart. I know how much this means to you, but sometimes grown-ups have to make very difficult choices." Victoria watched as her daughter's face cycled through confusion, disappointment, and finally resignation. It was that last expression that broke her heart most of all. The way Lily simply accepted that her mother's work would always come first. "That's okay, Mommy," Lily said quietly, her voice carefully controlled. "I understand. Work is important." "Lily?" "It's okay," Lily repeated, but her hands were trembling as she adjusted her fairy wings. Will you ask Jennifer to record it on her phone, so you can watch it later?" Victoria felt tears threatening a luxury she couldn't afford with the crisis waiting at the office. "Of course, sweetheart. I'll watch it as soon as I can." 20 minutes later, Victoria was in her car, racing toward downtown, while her assistant fielded calls from increasingly agitated board members. Behind her in the rearview mirror, she could see Lily's face in the window of their house, still wearing her fairy costume, watching her mother drive away. The board meeting was a disaster. For 6 hours, Victoria fought to save the Yamamoto deal, fielding accusations and demands from investors who had grown rich off her success, but were ready to abandon her at the first sign of trouble. The family entertainment division that had been her passion project, the part of her empire designed to create wholesome content for children like Lily, was being attacked as a financial liability. Perhaps it's time to consider whether your personal life is affecting your business judgment, suggested Harrison Bradford, a board member who had opposed Victoria's appointment as CEO from the beginning. This focus on children's programming, these recent changes in your schedule and priorities. Victoria's jaw tightened. My personal life has no bearing on my ability to run this company. Doesn't it? Bradford leaned forward, his expression coldly calculating. 6 months ago, you would have been in Tokyo personally managing this crisis face to face. Instead, you're delegating international relationships while you attend school plays. The accusation hung in the room like poison. Victoria felt the familiar surge of defensive anger, the need to prove that she could be ruthlessly focused on business when necessary. These men had never questioned her dedication before, had never suggested that her personal life interfered with her professional obligations. But even as she prepared to defend herself, another voice whispered in her mind. Lily's voice, resigned and understanding. It's okay, Mommy. Work is important. I've dedicated 15 years of my life to building this company, Victoria said finally. I've sacrificed everything for its success. If you question my commitment now, then perhaps you don't deserve the profits you've earned from my dedication. The meeting ended with no resolution, the Yamamoto deal still hanging in limbo, and Victoria's position more precarious than it had been since she'd first taken control of the company. She spent the rest of the day in emergency meetings with lawyers and financial advisors, trying to stem the bleeding while preparing for a potential battle with her own board. It was nearly 9 p.m. when she finally returned home. The house was quiet. Lily already in bed, her fairy costume hanging carefully in the closet, like a reminder of the choice Victoria had made. Victoria found her daughter awake, reading by the soft glow of her bedside lamp. How was your play, sweetheart? Lily looked up with a carefully neutral expression. It was good. Emma and Mr. Jake came and watched. Emma said I was the best fairy in the whole production. I'm sure you were wonderful. Jennifer recorded it on her phone like you asked. Do you want to watch it now? Victoria looked at her daughter, this beautiful, forgiving child who had learned too young to accept disappointment with grace. More than anything. They watched the recording together on Victoria's phone, Lily's face lighting up as she narrated her performance. On the small screen, she danced and sang with uninhibited joy, completely present in the moment, living fully in the magical world of the play. You were magnificent, Victoria whispered, pulling her daughter close. I missed you being there, Lily said quietly. But I understand. Sometimes work has to come first. Victoria's throat tightened. What if I told you that I don't want it to come first anymore? Lily looked up at her with surprise. What do you mean? I mean that watching you on this tiny screen isn't enough. I want to be there for real next time. I want to be present for your life, not just watching recordings of it. But what about work? What about the company? Victoria thought about the board meeting, about Harrison Bradford's accusations, about the empire she had built at the cost of everything else in her life. The company will survive without me for a few hours, but I won't get these moments with you back. I won't get to see you grow up twice. Lily smiled for the first time since that morning. Really, from now on, your plays, your school events, your life, that comes first. Work can wait. As Victoria tucked her daughter into bed, she realized that the crisis at the office, devastating as it was, had forced her to confront a truth she'd been avoiding. She had spent so many years building walls to protect herself and her companies that she'd forgotten to build a life worth protecting. Tomorrow, she would face whatever consequences came from her choices today. But tonight, she was exactly where she belonged. The consequences arrived faster than Victoria anticipated. By Thursday morning, 3 more board members had called emergency meetings to discuss leadership concerns. The financial press was speculating about internal conflicts at Blackwell Industries, and their stock price had dropped another 8% overnight. Victoria sat in her office at 6 a.m., surrounded by reports and analysis that painted an increasingly dire picture. The Yamamoto deal was officially dead. 2 other potential acquisitions had been put on hold pending leadership clarification. And Harrison Bradford was quietly building a coalition of board members who questioned her fitness to continue as CEO. "We could fight this," Margaret Walsh said during their morning strategy session. "Bring in the lawyers, challenge them on procedural grounds, remind them of your track record." Or Victoria asked, though she could see the alternative in Margaret's grim expression. "Or we consider whether this is a battle worth fighting. Your position is strong, but not unassailable. Bradford has been working on this for months, waiting for the right moment to strike." Victoria's phone buzzed with a text message. "Jake, Lily seems upset this morning. She won't say what's wrong, but Emma is worried about her. Everything okay?" The message hit Victoria like a physical blow. In her focus on corporate warfare, she'd barely seen Lily for the past 2 days, leaving early and returning late, buried in crisis management. Her daughter was suffering, and Victoria hadn't even noticed. "Margaret, I need to make a call." "Victoria, we have the emergency board meeting in an hour. The call can't wait." Victoria dialed Jake's number, stepping out onto her office balcony where she could speak privately. "Jake, it's Victoria. Is Lily okay?" "She's physically fine, but she's been very quiet since Tuesday night. She keeps asking if you're angry with her if she did something wrong." Victoria's throat constricted. "Why would she think that?" "Because you've barely spoken to her since the night of her play. She knows something's wrong, and kids always assume it's their fault." The truth of his words cut deep. Victoria had been so consumed with protecting her professional legacy that she'd inadvertently abandoned her daughter emotionally, reverting to the distant, distracted parenting that had defined their relationship before Jake entered their lives. "I need to fix this," Victoria said. "Yes, you do." But Victoria fixing it means being present, not just promising to be present. Lily needs consistency, not grand gestures, followed by more absence. "I know, there's so much happening at work. I'm fighting for my company my entire career. I understand that. But what good is saving your career if you lose your daughter in the process?" After ending the call, Victoria stood on her balcony, looking out over the city she'd helped build, the empire of steel and glass that bore her name. Below, people hurried along sidewalks, caught up in their own struggles and ambitions. For 15 years, this had been her world, her identity, her everything. But somewhere in a suburban elementary school, her daughter was wondering if her mother still loved her. Victoria's assistant appeared in the doorway. "Ms. Blackwell, the board members are arriving. Cancel it. I'm sorry. Cancel the meeting. Tell them we'll reschedule for tomorrow." But Ms. Blackwell, Mr. Bradford, specifically said, "I don't care what Bradford said." Family emergency. 20 minutes later, Victoria was pulling into the parking lot of Lincoln Elementary School. She'd never visited during school hours, had never seen the building filled with the energy of children learning and playing. Through classroom windows, she could see young faces bent over desks, teachers moving between rows of students, the quiet magic of education happening in real time. The main office was organized chaos, with phones ringing and staff members managing the constant flow of parents' deliveries and minor crises that defined elementary school administration. Ms. Blackwell, Principal Wheeler, appeared clearly surprised. "Is everything all right? Is there an emergency with Lily?" "I hope not," Victoria said. "I'd like to take her out for the rest of the day, if that's possible." "Of course. Let me call down to her classroom." Victoria waited in the hallway, watching a parade of children walk past with bathroom passes and library books. A few minutes later, Lily appeared with her teacher, her face a mixture of confusion and barely concealed hope. "Mummy, what are you doing here? I came to take you on an adventure," Victoria said, kneeling down to her daughter's eye level. "If you'd like to go." Lily's eyes widened. "But what about school? And your work? School will be here tomorrow? And work?" Victoria paused, realizing that for the first time in her adult life, she was about to utter words that would have been unthinkable just weeks ago. "Work isn't as important as spending time with you." They drove to the coast an hour away, where Victoria had never been despite living in the area for years. Lily chattered excitedly in the back seat, her earlier sadness melting away as they put distance between themselves and their usual routines. "Where are we going, Mommy?" "I don't know," Victoria admitted. "I thought we could explore together." They found a small seaside town that seemed untouched by the corporate development that defined so much of the coast. They walked along a rocky beach, collecting shells and watching seabirds dive for fish. Victoria had never realized how much Lily loved the ocean, how her daughter's face lit up at the sight of waves crashing against the shore. "Daddy used to bring me here sometimes," Lily said quietly, referring to her father who had died when she was barely 3. "At least I think he did. I have pictures, but I'm not sure if I remember or if I just remember the pictures." Victoria felt a stab of guilt. She'd been so focused on moving forward after her husband's death, on building the company he'd started, that she'd never taken time to help Lily connect with his memory. "Tell me what you remember about him," Victoria said. They sat on a piece of driftwood, Lily's small hand in Victoria's larger one, while her daughter shared fragments of memory and imagination about the father she barely knew. Victoria found herself telling stories too, sharing moments from their marriage that she'd locked away in the vault of her grief. "He would have loved watching your play the other night," Victoria said. "He would have been so proud of you. Do you think he's watching from heaven?" "I hope so, sweetheart. I really hope so." As the afternoon wore on, Victoria's phone buzzed repeatedly with calls and messages that she ignored. For the first time in years, she was completely present in a single moment, focused entirely on her daughter's happiness rather than the empire that waited for her attention. They had dinner at a small fish restaurant, where the waitress knew everyone by name, and the menu was handwritten on a chalkboard. Lily ordered fish and chips, like a regular kid getting tartar sauce on her school uniform and not caring about the mess. "This is the best day ever," Lily announced, her face glowing with contentment. "Just you and me." "For me too," Victoria said, and realized she meant it completely. On the drive home, Lily fell asleep in the back seat, exhausted by the excitement and ocean air. Victoria drove slowly, wanting to extend these precious hours, knowing that tomorrow she would have to return to the corporate battle that threatened everything she'd built. But tonight she had something more valuable than any company: the trust of her daughter, freely given and gratefully received. Victoria's phone was ringing before she'd even finished her morning coffee. Margaret's voice was tight with urgency. "Victoria, where were you yesterday?" "Bradford called 3 emergency meetings, and when you didn't show up, he started telling people you'd had some kind of breakdown." "I took my daughter to the beach," Victoria said calmly, watching Lily eat breakfast with the relaxed contentment of a child who knew she was loved. "The beach, Victoria, they're trying to remove you as CEO. This isn't the time for personal days." Victoria felt the familiar surge of panic, the corporate warrior's instinct to drop everything and fight for her position. But then Lily looked up and smiled, tartar sauce still faintly visible on her school uniform, despite Victoria's attempts to wash it out. "What does Bradford need for this coup attempt?" Victoria asked. "A majority of board votes. He has 5 committed needs. 6. The meeting is scheduled for this afternoon. Victoria calculated quickly. If she spent the morning rallying her allies, making deals, calling in favors, she could probably secure enough votes to survive. But it would require the kind of total commitment that had defined her career, the willingness to sacrifice everything else for the sake of corporate victory. Mummy Lily said quietly, "You have that look again." "What look, sweetheart?" "The one you get when work is trying to take you away from me." Victoria stared at her daughter, seeing not just the immediate moment, but the trajectory of choices that stretched ahead. She could fight this battle and probably win, but at what cost? How many school plays would she miss? How many conversations about dead fathers and ocean adventures would never happen? Margaret Victoria said into the phone, "I need you to do something for me. Anything. I need you to call Bradford and tell him I'll meet with him privately before the board meeting. Just him and me." "Victoria, that's exactly what he wants. He's trying to isolate you. Trust me." Harrison Bradford was waiting in the small conference room when Victoria arrived, his expression smugly confident. At 65, he represented the old guard of corporate leadership men who believed that business was war and everything else was weakness. "Victoria, I'm glad you're finally ready to be reasonable about this situation." Victoria sat across from him, studying his face. "What do you want, Harrison?" "I want what's best for the company. And frankly, your recent behavior suggests that you're no longer capable of providing that." "My recent behavior? Missing crucial meetings to attend children's plays. Taking unscheduled days off during our biggest crisis in years. Your priorities have clearly shifted, and while I'm sure that makes you a better mother, it makes you a liability as CEO. Victoria felt the familiar anger rise in her chest, but underneath it was something else, clarity. "You're right." Bradford blinked. "Excuse me, you're absolutely right. My priorities have shifted. For 15 years, I've given this company everything, my time, my energy, my health, my relationships. I've missed family dinners, vacations, moments with my daughter that I'll never get back. And for what? For one of the most successful companies in the industry. For your profits, Harrison. For the stock options that have made you wealthy. For the quarterly returns that you use to justify your existence." Bradford's face hardened. "That's exactly the kind of thinking that makes you unfit for leadership. You've lost the killer instinct that built this company." Victoria leaned forward. "No, I've found something more valuable. I've found a life worth living." "What are you saying?" Victoria pulled out a document she'd spent the morning preparing with her lawyers. "I'm saying that you can have the company, Harrison. I'm resigning as CEO, effective immediately." The silence that followed was deafening. Bradford stared at the resignation letter as if it might be a trick. "You're resigning." "I'm choosing my daughter over your boardroom battles. I'm choosing presence over profits. I'm choosing to be the mother that Lily deserves instead of the CEO you think you need. You can't be serious. This is your life's work." Victoria thought about Lily sleeping peacefully in the car on their drive home from the beach, about the joy on her daughter's face during their ocean adventure, about the conversations they'd had about fathers and heaven and fish and chips. "No, Harrison. Lily is my life's work. The company is just a company." 2 hours later, Victoria stood in the elementary school parking lot, waiting for Lily to emerge from her after-school program. Other parents clustered in small groups, discussing soccer schedules and birthday parties, and all the ordinary concerns of people whose lives weren't defined by board meetings and stock prices. Jake appeared beside her, Emma skipping ahead to join a group of friends. "I heard about your resignation," he said quietly. "It's all over the business news. Good news travels fast. Are you okay?" Victoria watched Lily run across the playground, her backpack bouncing as she hurried toward them. Her daughter's face was bright with excitement about whatever she'd learned in school that day, eager to share every detail with her mother. "I'm better than I've been in years," Victoria said honestly. "What will you do now? I have no idea. For the first time in my adult life, I don't have a 5-year plan or a strategic vision. I just want to be Lily's mom." Lily reached them breathless with excitement. "Mommy, guess what? We're doing a winter concert next month and Mrs. Patterson says I can have a solo if I practice really hard." "That's wonderful, sweetheart. We'll practice together every day." "Really? You'll help me with my song?" Every single note, Victoria promised, and meant it completely. As they walked toward the car together, Jake carrying Emma's overloaded backpack and Victoria listening to Lily's detailed account of her day, Victoria felt something she hadn't experienced in years. Peace, not the temporary satisfaction of a successful business deal, but the deep contentment that comes from knowing you're exactly where you're supposed to be. Her phone buzzed with calls from reporters and board members and industry analysts, all wanting to know why Victoria Blackwell had walked away from her billion-dollar empire. But for the first time in her life, Victoria let the calls go to voicemail. She had more important things to do. She had a daughter to raise, and she was finally ready to show up for the job. The first morning of Victoria's new life began at 7 a.m. with Lily jumping on her bed, an action that would have been unthinkable just months earlier when their household ran on corporate schedules and maintained proper boundaries between parent and child. "Mummy, wake up. I want to make pancakes for breakfast, and Jake taught me how to do the flip thing with the spatula." Victoria opened her eyes to find her daughter's face inches from her own, bright with excitement and sticky with what appeared to be toothpaste. For the first time in her adult life, she had nowhere urgent to be, no calls to take, no crisis demanding immediate attention. "Pancakes sound wonderful," Victoria said, pulling Lily into a hug that lasted longer than any embrace they'd shared since Lily was a toddler. "Should we call Jake and Emma to join us? Can we really?" On a Wednesday morning, Victoria realized that in Lily's experience, weekday breakfasts had always been rushed affairs managed by household staff, while Victoria prepared for her day. The idea of a leisurely family meal on a school morning was as foreign to her daughter as it had been to Victoria herself. "Really? We have plenty of time." 20 minutes later, Jake and Emma were in Victoria's kitchen, which was larger and more expensively equipped than any space needed for actual cooking, but had never been used for family meals. Emma immediately began exploring the gadgets with the enthusiasm of a child in a toy store. "Your blender is huge," she announced. "It could probably make smoothies for like 20 people." "I'm not sure I've ever actually used it," Victoria admitted. Jake smiled as he surveyed the pristine kitchen. "Well, we're about to break it in properly. Emma, what's the first rule of pancake making?" "Everyone gets messy and nobody worries about it," Emma recited dutifully. Victoria watched as Jake moved through her kitchen with easy confidence, finding mixing bowls and measuring cups, while Emma and Lily gathered ingredients with the kind of joyful chaos that Victoria was learning to appreciate rather than control. "Victoria, you're in charge of the coffee," Jake said, handing her a whisk. "And maybe you could teach Lily how to crack eggs without getting shells in the bowl." "I've never actually." Victoria stopped realizing how that sentence revealed the gap between her financial success and her practical life skills. "I mean, I'd love to learn alongside Lily." What followed was the kind of morning Victoria had seen in movies but never experienced in reality. Flour on the counters, laughter echoing off the high ceilings, and the rich smell of bacon cooking, while children chatted about their plans for the day. Lily was transformed in this environment, confident and animated in ways that her carefully structured previous life had never allowed. She stood on a step stool beside Victoria, carefully cracking eggs and whisking batter with intense concentration. The trick, Emma explained with the authority of an 8-year-old expert, is to not worry if the pancakes are perfect circles. Daddy says the weird-shaped ones taste better anyway. Emma's absolutely right, Jake agreed, flipping a pancake that looked more like a map of an undiscovered continent than a breakfast food. Perfect is overrated. Victoria found herself laughing as her own pancake attempt resulted in something that resembled abstract art more than food. 6 months ago, such imperfection would have frustrated her intensely. Now, watching Lily giggle at their shared culinary failures, Victoria realized that the mess was part of the joy. They ate at Victoria's formal dining room table, which had never been used for anything more casual than business dinners. Emma and Lily swung their legs from chairs designed for adult proportions, syrup dripping onto placemats that had cost more than most people spent on a month of groceries. "This is so much better than cereal," Lily announced through a mouthful of slightly lopsided pancake. "We should do this every day," Emma added. "Like a family." The word hung in the air, simple and profound. Victoria caught Jake's eye across the table and saw her own thoughts reflected in his expression. This felt like family in ways that all her wealth and careful planning had never achieved. After breakfast, they discovered they had time for the kind of morning routine that Victoria had never experienced. Jake braided Lily's hair, while Emma helped Victoria pack lunches, teaching her the essential elements that no child should be without. "You need a juice box, definitely," Emma explained seriously. "And something crunchy, something soft, and something that makes other kids want to trade with you. What makes kids want to trade homemade cookies? But since we don't have any today, these fancy crackers will probably work." Victoria watched Jake with the girls and saw a kind of parenting that was completely natural, yet completely foreign to her experience. He was patient without being permissive, engaged without being overwhelming, present without being controlling. He made being a parent look like the most natural thing in the world. "How do you make it look so easy?" she asked as they walked the children to the bus stop. "It's not easy," Jake said honestly. "I just figured out that showing up is more important than being perfect." After the bus pulled away, Victoria and Jake walked back to her house together. For the first time since her resignation, Victoria felt the anxiety of unstructured time ahead of her. "I have no idea what to do with myself," she admitted. "For 15 years, every minute of my day was scheduled. I haven't had an empty calendar since Lily was born." "What would you like to do?" Jake asked. Victoria considered the question seriously. What did she want to do with her time when it wasn't dictated by board meetings and conference calls? "I'd like to learn how to take care of my own life," she said finally. "I've had assistants and housekeepers and staff for so long that I'm not sure I remember how to be a normal person." Jake smiled. "Lucky for you, I'm an expert at normal." "Want to start with grocery shopping?" They spent the morning at the supermarket, an experience that was both mundane and revelatory for Victoria. She'd forgotten that choosing your own food could be pleasurable, that reading ingredient labels could be interesting, that the simple act of pushing a cart through aisles could feel like an adventure when you weren't rushing to get back to something more important. Lily likes strawberry yogurt, but only the kind with the cartoon characters on it, Jake observed as they navigated the dairy section. "How do you know that I pay attention?" She mentioned it 3 weeks ago when Emma was eating one at our house. Victoria realized that despite living with Lily for 8 years, she knew surprisingly little about her daughter's preferences. She'd provided everything Lily might need, but had rarely bothered to discover what Lily actually wanted. "I have a lot to learn," she said. "We all do. That's what makes it interesting." They had lunch at a small cafe near the elementary school, the kind of place where Victoria would never have thought to eat when her life was defined by corporate dining and business lunches. The food was simple, the atmosphere unpretentious, and for the first time in years, Victoria found herself relaxed enough to actually taste what she was eating. "Do you miss it?" Jake asked as they shared a dessert that was definitely not on any executive dining room menu. "The company, the power, the feeling of running an empire." Victoria considered the question honestly. "I miss the sense of purpose it gave me, the feeling that I was building something important. But I don't miss the constant pressure the fear of failure, the way it consumed every other aspect of my life. What if you could build something important that didn't consume your life? Like what Jake gestured toward the elementary school visible through the restaurant window. Like being the kind of mother that Lily deserves. Like helping other parents figure out how to balance work and family. Like using your skills and resources for something that actually matters. That afternoon, they picked up the girls from school together, and Victoria experienced the simple pleasure of hearing about her daughter's day in detail. Not the abbreviated summaries that Lily had learned to provide when Victoria was distracted by work, but the full story of playground adventures and classroom discoveries, and the minor dramas that defined 8-year-old social life. Amanda brought her hamster for show and tell, and it escaped and ran around the classroom for like 10 minutes. Lily reported breathlessly. Mrs. Patterson was trying to catch it with a butterfly net, and everyone was laughing except for Marcus because he's afraid of rodents. Victoria found herself genuinely interested in these stories, invested in the cast of characters that populated her daughter's daily life. For years, she'd dismissed such tales as unimportant compared to her business concerns. Now she realized they were the substance of Lily's world, the experiences that were shaping her daughter's understanding of friendship and community, and her place in both. That evening, they cooked dinner together, all 4 of them crowding into Victoria's kitchen with the easy familiarity of people who belonged together. Emma taught Lily a complicated clapping game, while Jake showed Victoria how to properly dice an onion without crying. The trick is keeping the knife sharp and the onion cold. He explained, his hands guiding hers through the proper technique. It's all about respecting the process. Victoria realized that everything about this new life was about respecting process over outcomes, presence over productivity, connection over achievement. It was the opposite of everything that had driven her corporate success, and yet it felt more satisfying than any business triumph she'd ever experienced. After dinner, they helped the girls with homework at Victoria's dining room table, transforming the formal space into a learning center covered with art supplies and math worksheets and the organized chaos of childhood education. I never realized how much work goes into elementary school, Victoria said, as she helped Lily practice spelling words that seemed designed to trip up 8-year-old tongues. Wait until you see the science fair projects, Jake said with a grin. That's when parenting gets really complicated. As the evening wound down and Jake prepared to take Emma home, Victoria felt a reluctance to see them leave. The house would feel too quiet, too empty, too much like the sterile environment she'd maintained when her life was all work and no joy. Could we do this again tomorrow? She asked, trying not to sound as desperate as she felt. I was hoping you'd ask, Jake said. After they left, Victoria tucked Lily into bed with the kind of unhurried attention she'd never been able to provide when corporate demands waited for her focus. Mommy, Lily said, as Victoria brushed her hair with slow, gentle strokes. I like you better now. What do you mean, sweetheart? You're not scary anymore. You're just... Mommy. Victoria felt tears prick her eyes. Was I scary before? Not scary. But you were always thinking about other things even when you were looking at me. Now you're really here. I'm going to keep being really here, Victoria promised, every day, even when work tries to take you away again. Especially then. As Lily drifted off to sleep, Victoria sat beside her bed and marveled at the transformation that had occurred in both their lives. A month ago, she'd been the CEO of a billion-dollar empire, feared and respected and utterly disconnected from anything that actually mattered. Now she was simply Lily's mother, and somehow that felt like a promotion rather than a step down. Outside, the city lights twinkled with the energy of millions of people pursuing their own definitions of success. But inside this room, watching her daughter sleep peacefully for the first time in years, Victoria knew she'd finally found hers. 3 weeks into their new routine, the first real test arrived in the form of a phone call from Lincoln Elementary's principal. Victoria was in her garden learning to plant winter vegetables with Lily's patient instruction when her phone rang with Dr. Wheeler's number. "Ms. Blackwell, I'm afraid we have a situation involving Lily that requires your immediate attention." Victoria's blood ran cold. "Is she hurt?" No, nothing like that. But there's been an incident with some other students, and I think it would be best if you could come in to discuss it." 20 minutes later, Victoria sat in the principal's office across from Dr. Wheeler and the school counselor, Mrs. Garcia. Lily was in the outer office, her face streaked with tears, and her usually perfect posture collapsed into the defensive hunch of a child who'd been hurt. "What happened?" Victoria asked, her protective instincts overriding everything else. Dr. Wheeler shifted uncomfortably. "There was an altercation during lunch period. Some of the older students they were teasing Lily about her family situation." "Her family situation." Mrs. Garcia leaned forward with the gentle manner of someone who'd delivered difficult news to parents many times before. "Lily's been talking quite openly about the changes in her home life, how much happier she is now that you're spending more time together. Some of the 5th graders overheard and began making comments about how her mother lost her job and how she's poor now." Victoria felt anger surge through her chest. "Poor children don't understand the nuances of business decisions," Dr. Wheeler said quickly. "They heard that you resigned from your company and jumped to their own conclusions." "What did they say to her specifically?" Mrs. Garcia consulted her notes. "According to witnesses, they told her that her mother was a loser who got fired for being bad at her job. They suggested that she'd have to go to public school now and that her family would probably lose their house." Victoria's hands clenched into fists. The maternal fury she felt was unlike any emotion she'd experienced in corporate boardrooms, raw and primitive, and absolutely focused on protecting her child. "How did Lily respond?" "She tried to explain that you chose to leave your job, that you wanted to spend more time with her. But the children persisted, and eventually—" Mrs. Garcia paused. "Eventually, Lily pushed one of them." She pushed them, Marcus Henley, a 5th grader, who was apparently the ringleader. Lily shoved him hard enough that he fell down, and then she ran to the bathroom and locked herself in a stall. Victoria's emotions cycled rapidly from anger at the children who'd hurt Lily to shock that her previously passive daughter had physically defended herself to pride that Lily had finally stood up for something she believed in. "Is Marcus hurt?" "Bruised ego more than anything else," Dr. Wheeler said. "But we do have a zero-tolerance policy regarding physical confrontations." The old Victoria, the CEO, Victoria would have immediately begun calculating how to minimize consequences, how to use her influence to protect Lily from any fallout. But the new Victoria, the mother Victoria, was more interested in understanding what her daughter needed. "May I speak with Lily?" "Of course. But I should mention that Marcus's parents are quite upset. They're demanding consequences." Victoria found Lily huddled in a chair in the main office, her tear-stained face lifting hopefully when her mother appeared. "Mommy, I'm sorry. I know I shouldn't have pushed him, but he wouldn't stop saying mean things about you." Victoria knelt in front of her daughter, taking Lily's small hands in her own. "Tell me exactly what happened, sweetheart." "Everything." Through hiccups and fresh tears, Lily recounted the lunchtime incident. Marcus and his friends had cornered her near the cafeteria, their voices loud enough that other children had gathered to watch the drama unfold. "They said you were stupid for leaving your job, that only stupid people give up important jobs. They said we'd probably have to move into an apartment and shop at discount stores, and that I'd have to go to regular school with regular kids. And what did you tell them? I told them that you left your job because you love me more than money. I told them that being with your family is more important than being the boss of a company. But they just laughed and said that was something poor people say when they can't keep good jobs." Victoria felt her heart break for her daughter's pain and swell with pride for her wisdom simultaneously. "Then what happened?" Marcus said. Lily's voice dropped to a whisper. He said that you probably never loved me before, that you only pretend to care about me now, because you don't have anything better to do. The words hit Victoria like a physical blow. The truth was that Marcus's cruel assessment wasn't entirely wrong. Victoria had used work as an excuse to avoid the vulnerable intimacy that real parenting required. But hearing that failure used as ammunition against her daughter was unbearable. That's when you pushed him. Lily nodded miserably. I got so angry. Not just sad angry, but really, really angry. I wanted him to stop talking, to stop saying things that made other kids think you didn't love me. Victoria pulled Lily into a fierce hug. Oh, sweetheart, I've always loved you even when I was too scared and too focused on work to show it properly. You defending me, defending our family, that took courage. But I'm in trouble now. Mrs. Garcia says I might get suspended. Let me worry about that. The important thing is that you stood up for what matters to you. I'm proud of you for that, even if pushing wasn't the right way to handle it. Victoria called Jake from the hallway outside the principal's office. She needed perspective from someone who understood both parenting and the complex social dynamics of elementary school. They're targeting her because she's different, Jake said after Victoria explained the situation. Rich kid who's suddenly talking about how money isn't important, that threatens their understanding of how the world works. How do I protect her from this? You don't. You teach her how to protect herself. What do you mean, Victoria? This isn't going to be the last time someone challenges Lily's choices or your choices. Instead of shielding her from it, help her develop the tools to handle it confidently. 20 minutes later, Jake arrived with Emma, who immediately went to Lily with the fierce loyalty that only best friends can provide. Marcus Henley is a big fat meanie, Emma declared. He made fun of my dad's job last year, calling him a janitor boy. Some kids are just bullies. What did you do when he made fun of your dad? Lily asked. I told him that my daddy works harder than any of their daddies and that he's not ashamed of honest work. Then I told Mrs. Patterson what Marcus said, and she made him write a letter of apology. Victoria watched this interaction with fascination. Emma had faced similar social challenges and developed strategies for handling them with dignity. She possessed a confidence in her family's choices that Lily was only beginning to develop. But what if they're right? Lily asked quietly. What if Mommy made a mistake leaving her job? What if we do become poor? Jake knelt beside both girls. Lily, can I tell you something important? She nodded. There are lots of different ways to be rich. Your mom was rich in money before, but she wasn't rich in time with you. Now she's rich in time, rich in family, rich in the things that actually make people happy. Some people never figure out the difference. But what about college and nice clothes and stuff? Victoria realized this was her moment to address her daughter's fears directly and honestly. Sweetheart, we're not going to be poor. I have enough money saved to take care of us for the rest of our lives. But even if we didn't, even if we had to live more simply, we'd still have each other. And that's worth more than any job or any amount of money. The meeting with Dr. Wheeler and Marcus's parents went better than Victoria expected. Jake's presence helped as a school employee. He had credibility with the administration, and his calm demeanor diffused some of the tension. Marcus's mother, a woman who clearly spent considerable effort maintaining her appearance and status, was initially demanding harsh punishment for Lily's violent outburst. Physical aggression cannot be tolerated, she insisted. If children aren't taught consequences for their actions, they'll never learn proper behavior. I agree, Victoria said calmly. That's why I'd like to understand what consequences Marcus will face for his verbal bullying. The room fell silent. Mrs. Henley's expression shifted from righteous indignation to uncomfortable defensiveness. Marcus was simply stating facts as he understood them, she said stiffly. No, Jake interjected quietly. Marcus was using personal information to hurt another child emotionally. That's bullying, and it's just as harmful as physical aggression. Dr. Wheeler, clearly uncomfortable with the direction the conversation was taking, suggested a compromise. Both children would receive equal consequences: a day of in-school suspension and mandatory participation in the school's conflict resolution program. "I think that's fair," Victoria said. "As long as both children understand that different families make different choices, and those choices should be respected." That evening, Victoria and Lily talked through the day's events while making dinner together. Lily was still processing the emotions of standing up for her family, the fear of consequences, and the confusing realization that other people might judge their choices. "Do you ever wish you hadn't left your job?" Lily asked as she helped Victoria chop vegetables. Victoria considered the question seriously. "Do you ever wish you hadn't pushed Marcus? I wish I'd found a better way to make him stop. But I'm glad I didn't just let him say mean things about you. That's exactly how I feel about leaving my job. I wish I'd figured out how to balance work and family better when you were younger. But I'm glad I chose family when I finally understood what mattered most. Even if other people think you made the wrong choice, especially then. The best choices are usually the ones that other people don't understand, because they're based on your values, not theirs." As they finished preparing dinner, waiting for Jake and Emma to arrive for their now daily family meal, Victoria reflected on how much they'd all grown in such a short time. Lily was developing the confidence to stand up for her beliefs. Victoria was learning to navigate parenthood without the armor of corporate authority. And together they were building something that no amount of money could buy: a real family, complicated and imperfect, and absolutely worth defending. The first time Victoria realized she was falling in love with Jake Morrison was during a completely ordinary moment in her completely transformed life. They were in her kitchen on a Thursday evening, Emma and Lily building an elaborate fort out of dining room chairs and bed sheets, while Jake taught Victoria how to make his mother's meatball recipe. "The secret is mixing breadcrumbs with milk first." Jake explained, his hands guiding hers as they combined ingredients in a large bowl. "My mom said it keeps them tender." Victoria found herself studying his hands as he demonstrated the proper mixing technique, work-worn but gentle, confident in this domestic space, in ways that her corporate experience had never prepared her to appreciate. When their fingers brushed as they reached for the same ingredient, she felt a jolt of awareness that had nothing to do with cooking. "Tell me about her," Victoria said suddenly, hungry for details about his life before she knew him. "Your mother." Jake smiled with the particular warmth people reserve for beloved memories. She was a teacher for 30 years, kindergarten mostly. She had this way of making every kid feel special, even the difficult ones. Especially the difficult ones. "Is she... She died 6 years ago." "Cancer." Emma barely remembers her, which breaks my heart sometimes. She would have loved being a grandmother. Victoria watched Jake's face as he spoke about loss, recognizing the particular sadness that comes from loving someone who can't be replaced. It was the same expression she'd seen in her own mirror after her husband's death, the look of someone who'd learned to carry grief alongside gratitude. "She would have loved Emma," Victoria said softly. "Any grandmother would be proud of that little girl." "Yeah, she would have. And she would have loved Lily too. Mom always said that families aren't just the people you're born to. They're the people who choose to love you back." The words settled in Victoria's chest with unexpected weight. For most of her life, she'd thought of family as an obligation, a genetic lottery that determined your starting point in life. But watching Jake with Emma, seeing how they'd naturally included her and Lily in their daily rhythms, she was beginning to understand family as something you built rather than something you inherited. "Daddy, we need help with the roof," Emma called from the living room, where the fort construction had reached an architectural crisis point. "In a minute, sweetheart. Victoria and I are at a critical meatball moment." "The roof is also critical," Lily added seriously. "It keeps falling down, and our fort citizens are getting worried about the structural integrity." Victoria burst into laughter at her daughter's vocabulary. Our fort citizens have very sophisticated concerns. Must be all that expensive education, Jake said. With a grin, then immediately looked stricken. I'm sorry, I didn't mean Jake. Victoria touched his arm gently. I can laugh about my previous life choices. In fact, I'm learning that laughing about them is probably healthier than defending them. They finished the meatballs together, working in the easy synchronization that Victoria had never experienced with anyone, not even during her marriage. With David, there had always been an underlying competition, a sense that they were both building individual empires that happened to share a legal contract. With Jake, there was collaboration, a sense that they were building something together that was larger than either could create alone. Fort emergency, Emma announced, running into the kitchen with her hair disheveled from crawling through their construction project. The whole north wall collapsed, and Lily's trapped under a blanket avalanche. This sounds serious, Jake said solemnly. Victoria, are you prepared to assist in a rescue mission? I have no rescue experience, Victoria admitted, but I'm willing to learn. What followed was 20 minutes of controlled chaos as all four of them rebuilt the fort with improved engineering principles and better foundational support. Victoria found herself crawling through fabric tunnels and holding bedsheets taut, while Jake secured them with clips, laughing harder than she had in years. You're really good at this, Lily observed, as Victoria helped solve a particularly tricky corner junction problem. Good at what? Being a regular mum. Not the scary boss kind of mum, but the fun kind who gets messy and doesn't worry about stuff being perfect. Victoria felt a rush of pride at her daughter's assessment. 6 months ago, being called a regular mum would have felt like an insult. Now it sounded like the highest possible praise. During dinner eaten inside the newly stable fort, because Emma and Lily had declared it a special dining room for special food, Victoria found herself studying Jake's interactions with both girls. He listened to their stories with genuine interest, asked thoughtful questions about their school day, and somehow managed to make each child feel like the most important person in the room. Mr. Jake, Lily said between bites of meatball, Emma told me that you used to be married to her mummy before she died. Victoria tensed slightly, uncertain how Jake would handle such a direct question about his loss. That's right, Jake said calmly. Her name was Sarah, and she was wonderful. She would have really liked you. Do you miss her every day? But missing someone doesn't mean you can't be happy with new people in your life. Love isn't like money, where having less for one person means having less for everyone else. Love grows when you share it. Emma nodded sagely. That's why I can love both my mummy who's in heaven and Victoria and Lily, because love just makes more love. Victoria felt tears prick her eyes at the 8-year-old wisdom, at the matter-of-fact acceptance these children had developed regarding loss and renewal, grief and joy existing side by side. Later that evening, after Emma and Lily had fallen asleep in the fort, they'd insisted was too important to abandon for regular beds. Victoria and Jake found themselves alone in her kitchen, cleaning dishes and talking in the quiet voices parents use when children are sleeping nearby. I need to tell you something, Victoria said, suddenly nervous in a way she hadn't felt since high school. Jake paused in his dish, drying, giving her his full attention. I think I'm falling in love with you, she said quietly. Actually, I know I am. And that terrifies me because I'm so bad at this, at relationships, at being vulnerable with another person. Jake set down the dish towel and turned to face her fully. Victoria. I know it's complicated, she rushed on. We have children to consider, and I've never been good at balancing personal relationships with everything else in my life. I destroyed my marriage because I didn't know how to be present for another person, and I'm scared that Victoria... Jake's voice was gentle but firm, stopping her spiral of worry. I'm in love with you too. The simple statement hung in the air between them, honest and uncomplicated, and absolutely true. You are... I've been in love with you since the third playdate when you let Mr. Whiskers sleep on your lap for 2 hours, even though you're allergic to cats, just because you didn't want to disturb him. I'm not allergic to cats. I know that now. But you kept sneezing and I assumed— Jake laughed. Turns out you were getting sick, but you were so determined to seem like the kind of person who enjoyed cat companionship that you suffered through it anyway. Victoria remembered that afternoon, how she'd been desperately trying to prove that she could be the kind of relaxed, family-oriented person who belonged in Jake's world. The fact that he'd found her efforts endearing rather than pathetic made something warm unfurl in her chest. "So what do we do now?" she asked. "Now we figure out how to build something together. Slowly, carefully, with Emma and Lily's needs at the center of every decision. I don't know how to date someone when children are involved. I don't know the rules or the timeline or the appropriate progression of Jake," silenced her with a kiss soft and sure and full of promise. When they broke apart, he rested his forehead against hers. "There are no rules, Victoria. There's just us figuring it out together, making mistakes and learning from them, showing up for each other and for our kids every single day." That sounds terrifying and wonderful. The best things usually do. They stood together in her kitchen, surrounded by the comfortable debris of family life, fort-building supplies and dinner dishes, children's artwork and homework folders, and Victoria felt a contentment that had nothing to do with achievement or acquisition. This was what she'd been searching for without knowing it. Not the absence of challenge, but the presence of love, worth any challenge. From the living room came the soft sound of children's breathing. 2 little girls who'd found sisterhood in friendship, who'd helped their parents find their way back to hope after loss. Victoria thought about Emma's wisdom regarding love, that it grows when you share it, that having more love for new people doesn't diminish love for those who came before. For the first time in her adult life, Victoria was ready to share love without reservation, without strategic planning, without fear of the vulnerability that real intimacy required. She was ready to build a family not through corporate acquisition or careful negotiation, but through the daily choice to show up, to be present, to love imperfectly but completely. "The girls are going to be so excited when we tell them," Jake said, tucking a strand of hair behind Victoria's ear. "Should we be worried about how easily they've adapted to all of this? Is it healthy for them to get so attached so quickly?" "Victoria, they've been planning our wedding since the second playdate. I found drawings Emma made of all 4 of us holding hands outside a church. Lily's been practicing signing Emma Morrison in case Emma wants to be her official sister." Victoria laughed, imagining her daughter's careful planning. "Of course she has. She gets her organizational skills from me. Among other things, she also gets your determination, your intelligence, and your capacity for fierce love when you finally let yourself feel it." As they turned off the kitchen lights and prepared to wake the girls from their fort slumber party, Victoria reflected on the journey that had brought them to this moment. 6 months ago, she'd been the untouchable billionaire isolated by success and terrified of vulnerability. Now she was simply a woman in love, ready to build something real with a man who saw her completely and loved her anyway. It was, she realized, the greatest acquisition of her career, not a company or a contract, but a family worth everything she'd thought she wanted before she understood what she actually needed. 1 year after their first meeting at the school fundraiser, Jake Morrison stood in the principal's office at Lincoln Elementary, his heart pounding with the kind of nervous energy he hadn't felt since he'd asked Sarah to marry him 15 years earlier. In his pocket was a simple engagement ring, not the massive diamond that Victoria could easily afford, but something meaningful and personal that represented the life they'd built together rather than the life she'd left behind. "Are you sure about this plan?" Dr. Wheeler asked, reviewing the details Jake had outlined. "It's rather unconventional." "Victoria doesn't need conventional," Jake said, checking his watch. "She needs real. And this place, this moment, it's where everything began." Emma and Lily burst through the office door, their faces flushed with excitement and barely contained secrets. "Daddy, is it time?" Emma whispered dramatically. "Is the surprise ready?" "Almost, sweetheart. Remember, we need Victoria to think this is just a regular volunteer meeting about the spring carnival. She's going to cry happy tears Lily predicted with satisfaction. And then she's going to say yes, and then we're going to be official sisters." "What if she says no?" Emma asked, suddenly worried. Jake knelt down to meet his daughter's eyes. "She's not going to say no, Em. She loves us just like we love her." "How do you know for sure?" Because Lily said with 8-year-old certainty, when people love each other the way they do, they get married. It's like a rule. 20 minutes later, Victoria walked into what she believed was a planning meeting for the school's spring carnival. Instead, she found the gymnasium, transformed with the same twinkling lights and decorations from the fundraiser where they'd first met, but arranged now with intimate seating for the small group of people who had become their chosen family. Mrs. Chen, the art teacher who'd painted Emma's butterfly face that first night, was there. Mrs. Patterson, the school nurse who'd helped them through Lily's scraped knee crisis. Principal Wheeler, who'd witnessed the evolution of their relationship through numerous school events. And in the center of the decorated space stood Jake, Emma, and Lily, all three of them wearing expressions of nervous excitement. "What's going on?" Victoria asked, though her voice suggested she was beginning to understand. Mummy, Lily said, stepping forward with the poise she'd developed over their months of family life, "We have something very important to ask you." Emma joined her, holding a handmade poster that read, "Victoria plus Jake plus Emma plus Lily equals family," in colorful letters and decorated with drawings of all four of them together. Victoria Blackwell. Jake said, his voice steady, despite the emotion Victoria could see in his eyes. "1 year ago you were sitting alone at a table in this room, and your daughter was the loneliest little girl I'd ever seen." Victoria's breath caught as she realized where this was going. "Tonight I look at that same little girl, and she's confident and happy and surrounded by people who love her. I look at my daughter, and she has the sister she always wanted and the mother figure she thought she'd lost forever." Jake stepped closer, pulling the ring from his pocket. "But mostly, I look at you, and I see the person I want to spend the rest of my life, loving the person I want to raise children with, the person I want to grow old with." He dropped to one knee in the exact spot where he'd first approached Lily, at her isolated table 12 months earlier. "Victoria, will you marry me? Will you be my wife and Emma's stepmother and Lily's full-time mom and the center of this family we've built together?" Victoria looked around the gymnasium, taking in the faces of people who'd witnessed their journey, from strangers to family. She saw Mrs. Chen wiping away tears, Dr. Wheeler beaming with approval, and most importantly, she saw Emma and Lily watching her with expressions of such hope and love that her heart felt like it might burst. "Yes," she whispered. Then louder, "Yes, absolutely yes." Jake slipped the ring onto her finger, a simple band with a small diamond surrounded by 2 smaller stones representing their blended family. It was perfect in its modesty, meaningful in its symbolism. Nothing like the ostentatious jewelry she'd once worn to display her wealth. Emma and Lily rushed forward, wrapping their arms around both adults in a tangle of excitement and joy. "We're really going to be sisters now," Lily said, hugging Emma fiercely. "Official legal sisters with the same last name and everything. Morrison," Emma said, testing the sound. "Lily Morrison. That sounds perfect." Victoria felt tears streaming down her face as she held both girls and the man who'd taught her what love actually meant. Around them, their small, chosen family applauded and cheered, celebrating not just an engagement, but the completion of a transformation that had taken a year to accomplish. "I love you," Victoria whispered to Jake over the children's excited chatter. "I love all of you more than I ever thought possible. Enough to wear a silly dress and walk down an aisle in front of people, Jake asked with a grin. Enough for anything, Victoria said, meaning it completely. Mrs. Chen approached with a camera. Would you mind if I took some pictures? This is the most romantic proposal I've ever witnessed, and I think you'll want to remember every detail. As they posed for photos in the same gymnasium where Victoria had once stood as an isolated CEO, watching her isolated daughter from a distance, she marveled at the transformation in all of their lives. The venue hadn't changed, but everything else had been revolutionized by the simple decision to see each other clearly and choose love over fear. What kind of wedding do you want? Emma asked as they walked to their cars in the parking lot, where Victoria had once brought an entourage, but now travelled as part of a family. Simple, Victoria said immediately. Small. Just the people who matter most. Can we have it here? Lily asked. At the school. Since this is where you and Daddy fell in love? Jake and Victoria exchanged glances over the children's heads, both thinking the same thing. There was something beautifully circular about celebrating their marriage, in the place where they'd first learned to see beyond surface differences to the hearts that mattered. I think that's a perfect idea, Victoria said. That night, after they'd called their few close friends and family members to share the news, Victoria sat in her bedroom looking at her engagement ring and thinking about the journey that had brought her to this moment. A year ago, she'd been a woman who measured success in quarterly reports and stock prices. Now she was engaged to a man who measured success in his daughter's laughter and the strength of his family's bonds. Her phone buzzed with the text message from Margaret Walsh, her former COO, who'd kept in touch despite Victoria's dramatic departure. From corporate life saw the engagement announcement in the society pages. Congratulations, Harrison Bradford's wife is reportedly shocked that you're marrying the help. Thought you'd enjoy knowing you're still scandalizing people. Victoria laughed out loud at the message. A year ago she would have been mortified by society gossip, worried about her reputation and image. Now the fact that her choices continued to challenge other people's narrow definitions of success felt like a badge of honor. She texted back, "Let them be shocked. I've never been happier." Margaret's response came immediately. "Good for you. For what it's worth, you look more alive in these engagement photos than in any corporate headshot you ever took." Victoria walked to her mirror, studying her reflection. Margaret was right. She looked fundamentally different than she had a year ago. Not just the more casual clothes or the relaxed hairstyle, but something deeper. She looked like a woman who knew what mattered, who had stopped trying to prove her worth through achievement and started living it through love. From down the hall came the sound of Lily talking to someone on the phone, sharing the engagement news with her characteristic detailed enthusiasm. Victoria could hear fragments of the conversation, and there were lights everywhere, just like the first night, and Emma and I got to help with the surprise, and the ring is so pretty but not too big, and we're going to be the Morrison family. Victoria smiled at her daughter's joy. Tomorrow they would start planning a wedding. They would merge their households, officially navigate the legal complexities of adoption and name changes, and figure out how to blend their different backgrounds into one cohesive family unit. But tonight, Victoria was simply a woman in love, wearing an engagement ring that represented not what she could buy, but what she'd chosen to build. And for the first time in her adult life, that felt like enough, more than enough. It felt like everything. The morning of Victoria's wedding dawned crisp and clear, one of those perfect October days that seems designed for new beginnings. She woke in her childhood bedroom at Jake's modest house, having moved in 2 weeks earlier when they decided that his home felt more like a family space than her elegant but sterile mansion. Nervous Emma asked, appearing in the doorway with Lily close behind both girls, wearing their junior bridesmaid dresses and expressions of barely contained excitement. Terrified Victoria admitted, then smiled at their concerned faces. But the good kind of terrified. The kind that means something important is about to happen. "Daddy's been pacing around the living room for an hour," Lily reported, "and he burned the toast twice." Victoria laughed, imagining Jake's nervousness. They'd kept their wedding preparations simple: a small ceremony in Lincoln Elementary's gymnasium, followed by a reception in the same space where they'd first met. The guest list included fewer than 50 people, mostly school staff who'd witnessed their relationship develop, along with a few close friends and Victoria's small remaining family. "Should we go rescue him?" Victoria asked, pulling on her robe. "Uncle Mike already did," Emma said. Mike was Jake's brother who'd driven in from Portland to serve as best man. He took Daddy for a walk around the block and made him drink coffee that wasn't burned. As Victoria got ready for her wedding, she reflected on how different this preparation felt from her first marriage 15 years earlier. Then she'd been surrounded by a team of professional hair and makeup artists wearing a designer gown that had cost more than most people's annual salary, preparing for a ceremony that had been more corporate merger than celebration of love. Today, Mrs. Chen was doing her hair in the school library, chatting about the latest classroom art projects while she worked. Victoria's dress was beautiful but simple, something she'd chosen because it felt like herself, rather than because it would photograph well. Her makeup was her own applied, while Lily and Emma offered helpful suggestions about lip gloss and the proper amount of sparkle for a bride. "You look beautiful, Mommy," Lily said, as Victoria stood before the library's full-length mirror, borrowed from the drama department for the occasion. "We all look beautiful," Victoria replied, studying their reflection 3 generations of women who'd found each other through circumstances that none of them could have planned. Emma in her purple dress, matching the butterfly wings that Mrs. Chen had painted on her face a year ago. Lily in soft green, confident and glowing with happiness. And Victoria in ivory silk, looking more like herself than she had in any corporate suit. The gymnasium had been transformed into an elegant but intimate wedding venue. Jake's construction skills had proven invaluable in creating an archway of flowers and lights, while the combined artistic talents of the school community had produced decorations that were both beautiful and meaningful. Every detail reflected their blended family. Emma's artwork, incorporated into the programs, Lily's carefully practiced piano piece, planned for the processional photographs from their year together, displayed on tables that had once held silent auction items. As guests began arriving, Victoria watched from the doorway of the main office, amazed by the community they'd built. Mrs. Patterson brought homemade cookies. The custodial staff wore their best suits and biggest smiles. Several of Victoria's former employees attended, people who'd supported her corporate decisions, but seemed even happier to celebrate her personal ones. Ready Jake's brother Mike appeared beside her, offering his arm. Victoria had asked him to walk her down the aisle, not because tradition demanded a male escort, but because Mike had become the brother. She'd never had someone who'd welcomed her into Jake's family with unconditional warmth. "More than ready," Victoria said, meaning it. The ceremony itself was everything Victoria had never known she wanted. Jake stood at the front of the gymnasium, wearing a simple suit and the biggest smile she'd ever seen, with Emma and Lily flanking him as joint maids of honor. When Victoria walked down the aisle to music played by the school's small orchestra, she wasn't performing for cameras or managing her image. She was simply a woman walking toward the man she loved, surrounded by people who cared about their happiness. Their vows were personal and honest, written together over several evenings, while Emma and Lily offered editorial suggestions. Victoria promised to choose presence over productivity, family over fame, love over ambition. Jake promised to support her dreams while helping her remember what mattered most, to be her partner in parenting and her safe harbor in any storm. "Do you, Victoria, take Jake to be your husband, to love and support through success and struggle, in wealth and simplicity? For as long as you both shall live, I do," Victoria said, her voice steady and sure. Do you, Jake, take Victoria to be your wife to love and support through transformation and growth in joy and challenge? For as long as you both shall live, I do. When they kissed to seal their marriage, Emma and Lily cheered so loudly that the entire gymnasium erupted in laughter and applause. Victoria felt Jake's arms around her and heard their daughter's excitement and knew that she'd finally found her way home. The reception was exactly the kind of celebration Victoria had never thought she wanted, casual and warm, with guests mingling freely while children ran between tables, and the DJ played music that made people actually dance rather than network. Victoria found herself laughing harder than she had since childhood, dancing with guests who'd known her as the intimidating CEO and now saw her simply as Jake's wife and the girl's mother. "I can't believe you did it," Margaret Walsh said during the parent-child dance, where Victoria swayed with both Emma and Lily while Jake danced with an elderly neighbor who'd been like a grandmother to him. "You actually walked away from everything and built something completely different." "I didn't walk away from everything," Victoria replied, watching Jake spin his dance partner with gentle care. "I walked away from the wrong things so I could find the right ones." Any regrets? Victoria considered the question seriously, looking around the gymnasium at the celebration of their unconventional family. "I regret that it took me so long to figure out what mattered. But I don't regret any of the choices that brought me here." As the evening wound down and guests began to leave, Victoria found herself alone for a moment in the space where her transformation had begun. She stood at the table where Lily had once sat, isolated and untouchable, now covered with cards and flowers from people celebrating their family's happiness. Thinking deep thoughts, Jake appeared beside her, loosening his tie, with the relaxed satisfaction of a man who'd just married his best friend. Thinking about how much can change in a year, how different our lives are from what they were when we first met in this room. Better. Immeasurably better, for all of us. Jake wrapped his arms around her from behind, and they stood together, watching Emma and Lily help Mrs. Chen pack up the decorations, the two girls, chattering about their new shared bedroom and the family vacation they'd planned for next summer. Mrs. Morrison, Jake said, testing the sound of her new name. "I like it," Victoria said, settling back against his chest. "It sounds like belonging." As they left the school that night, walking hand in hand to the car with their daughters skipping ahead of them, Victoria thought about the journey that had brought them to this moment. A year ago, she'd been a woman who had everything except what mattered most. Tonight, she was simply a wife and mother, wealthy in all the ways that actually counted. The transformation was complete, but the story was just beginning. 5 years after their wedding, Victoria Morrison stood in the parking lot of Lincoln Elementary, watching Emma and Lily emerge from the building as teenagers 13 years old, confident and chattering about high school applications with the kind of easy intimacy that only true sisters share. "Mom, can you believe Lily got accepted to the Performing Arts program?" Emma announced, using the name that had evolved naturally from Victoria to Mom over their years as a family. "She's going to be famous someday." "And Emma got into the engineering track," Lily added, bumping her sister's shoulder affectionately. "She's going to build bridges that actually stay up, unlike that one she made for the science fair in 6th grade. Victoria smiled at their gentle teasing, marveling at how completely they'd become sisters in every way that mattered. They fought like siblings, supported each other like best friends, and shared the kind of unshakable bond that made their blended family feel like it had always existed this way. "Where's Dad?" Emma asked, looking around the parking lot. "He'll be here in a few minutes." School board meeting ran late. Jake had been elected to the Lincoln Elementary School Board 3 years earlier, representing the interests of working families and bringing his practical perspective to educational policy decisions. It was volunteer work that he pursued with the same dedication he'd once brought to his custodial duties, though now he worked as the district's facilities director, overseeing maintenance and safety for all elementary schools in their area. "Mrs. Morrison." A familiar voice made Victoria turn. Mrs. Chen approached, now retired from teaching, but still volunteering in the art program. I wanted to let you know how much the scholarship program has meant to our students. The latest recipient just finished her first semester at art college. Victoria smiled with satisfaction. The Morrison Family Foundation, established 2 years after her wedding, provided scholarships for children from working-class families to attend summer art programs, music camps, and other enrichment opportunities that many parents couldn't afford. It wasn't the grand philanthropy of her corporate days, but it was more personal, and Victoria believed more meaningful. I'm so glad to hear that. Making sure all children have access to arts education that feels like the best use of resources I can imagine. After Mrs. Chen left, Victoria reflected on the path that had led her to this moment. The girl receiving the scholarship had been in the same position Lily had once occupied, isolated by circumstances beyond her control, but talented and deserving of opportunities. The foundation couldn't solve every problem, but it could open doors that might otherwise remain closed. Mom, Lily said, suddenly look. Victoria followed her daughter's gaze to see a small group of newer parents standing uncertainly near the school entrance. They were clearly working-class families, dressed carefully but modestly, wearing the expressions of people who weren't sure they belonged in this educational community. Should we go introduce ourselves? Emma suggested, already moving in their direction. Victoria felt a surge of pride watching her daughters naturally reach out to newcomers, having learned through their own experience that belonging was something you created for others rather than something you waited to receive. Mrs. Rodriguez Lily approached a woman who was clearly struggling with her elementary-age son's backpack while managing a baby and trying to read information from the school office. I'm Lily Morrison. My mom and sister and I were wondering if you need help carrying anything. What followed was exactly the kind of informal welcome that had been missing from Victoria's first experiences at Lincoln Elementary. Emma and Lily naturally included the new students in their conversation, while Victoria found herself talking with Mrs. Rodriguez about the school's programs, the best teachers, and the community resources that made Lincoln Elementary special. It's a good school, Victoria said honestly. More than that, it's a place where families take care of each other, where children learn to see past differences to what really matters. Jake arrived as this impromptu welcoming committee was exchanging contact information and making plans for the Rodriguez children to join Emma and Lily's study group. Making new friends, he asked, sliding his arm around Victoria's waist with the easy affection of a couple who'd grown more connected rather than more distant over their years of marriage. Teaching the next generation how to be welcoming. Victoria replied, watching Emma explain the lunch program options to Mrs. Rodriguez, while Lily entertained the younger children with increasingly elaborate stories about the playground equipment. As they walked to their car, Victoria's phone buzzed with a news alert. Blackwell Industries reports record quarterly loss, read the headline. The company she'd once run had struggled in the years since her departure, never quite recovering the innovative vision that had driven its early success. Regrets, Jake asked, having seen her glance at the phone. Only that I didn't leave sooner, Victoria said, meaning it. I spent so many years building something that couldn't survive without me. What we've built together, this family, this community, this life that's sustainable in ways that corporate empires never are. They drove home to this house they'd renovated together, transforming Jake's modest ranch into a space that reflected their blended family's needs and personalities. The walls were covered with photographs from their years together, camping trips and birthday parties, school events and quiet family dinners, the accumulation of a life lived intentionally rather than ambitiously. That evening, as had become their tradition, they gathered in the living room for family meeting time, where everyone could share highlights from their week and discuss any challenges or decisions that needed family input. I have something to share, Emma announced with the seriousness that meant she'd been thinking about whatever she was going to say. I've been thinking about college, and I know I'm only 13, but I want to go into engineering so I can design better accessibility features for public buildings. Victoria felt her heart swell with pride. That's wonderful, sweetheart. What inspired that? Remember when we went to that museum last month, and there was that family with the kid in a wheelchair who couldn't get to the second floor because the elevator was broken? That shouldn't happen. Buildings should work for everyone. And I want to study theatre arts and social work, Lily added, because I think drama therapy could help kids who have trouble expressing their feelings. Like how I used to be. Jake and Victoria exchanged glances over the girls' heads, both thinking the same thing their daughters had developed into young women who thought about how their talents could serve others, who saw their future careers as opportunities to build a more inclusive world. "We're very proud of both of you," Jake said quietly. "Your dreams are about making things better for other people, and that tells us we've done something right as parents." Later that night, after Emma and Lily had gone to their rooms to tackle homework and call friends, Victoria and Jake sat on their back porch swing watching stars appear in the clear autumn sky. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if you hadn't stopped to help Lily that first night?" Victoria asked. "Never," Jake said immediately, "because it wasn't chance that brought us together. It was choice, your choice to see past my job title, my choice to see past your reputation, the girls' choice to love each other like sisters. All the important things in life are choices." Victoria thought about the parents they'd met that afternoon, standing uncertainly at the school entrance, unsure of their welcome. Tomorrow, Emma and Lily would probably seek them out, offering friendship and inclusion with the natural generosity they'd learned from watching their parents navigate the world with kindness rather than judgment. "The circle completes itself," Victoria said softly. "What do you mean we were all lost when we found each other? Now our daughters are the ones helping other people find their way. The kindness you showed us gets passed on to the next generation." Jake squeezed her hand. "That's how it's supposed to work." As they sat together in comfortable silence, Victoria reflected on the transformation that had defined the last 6 years of her life. She'd gone from being Victoria Blackwell, the untouchable billionaire CEO, to Victoria Morrison, the school board president, who knew every custodian's name and whose greatest achievement was raising children who chose compassion over competition. The playground where everything began now featured a memorial bench dedicated to Sarah Morrison, Jake's first wife, whose death had shaped his understanding of what mattered most. The inscription read, "In memory of a teacher who knew that kindness is the most important lesson." It was surrounded by flowers that the elementary students planted each spring, tended by children who'd never met Sarah, but who benefited from the love she'd taught her husband to share. Victoria's old company continued to make headlines, though rarely positive ones. Harrison Bradford had proven to be exactly the kind of leader Victoria had expected, competent at maintaining profits, but incapable of inspiring innovation or loyalty. The employee satisfaction surveys that Victoria read occasionally showed declining morale and increasing turnover, the predictable result of leadership that viewed people as resources rather than human beings. But Victoria's new life was thriving in ways that couldn't be measured by stock prices or quarterly reports. Emma was developing into a young woman who combined intellectual brilliance with social consciousness. Lily had evolved from a lonely, isolated child into a confident performer who used her stage presence to advocate for causes she believed in. And Jake continued to be the steady, loving presence who made their family feel secure and connected. The Morrison family had become something beautiful and sustaining, built on the revolutionary idea that success should be measured by the quality of relationships rather than the size of bank accounts, that true wealth came from showing up for the people you loved rather than climbing corporate ladders that led nowhere meaningful. 6 years after a single dad had dared to approach the billionaire's daughter, their blended family stood as proof that the most important transformations happen not through dramatic gestures, but through daily choices to see clearly, love generously, and choose presence over prestige. Victoria Morrison had finally learned what it meant to be rich in all the ways that actually mattered, and she was passing that wisdom on to the next generation, ensuring that the circle of kindness would continue long after she was gone. The elementary school playground, where it all began, now bears a small plaque donated by the Morrison Family Foundation. Every child deserves to be seen valued and included. It serves as a daily reminder to the Lincoln Elementary community that transformation is always possible when people choose compassion over judgment. Victoria's former company was eventually acquired by a competitor, its innovative spirit never recovering from the leadership transition. Meanwhile, the Morrison Foundation has provided scholarships to over 200 children, creating opportunities for young people whose talents might otherwise go unrecognized and unsupported. Emma and Lily Morrison, now thriving teenagers, have become peer mentors for new students at their high school, particularly those who struggle with feeling like outsiders. They've learned from their parents that belonging is something you create for others, not something you wait to receive for yourself. If this story touched your heart the way it touched ours, please don't let it end here. Hit that subscribe button and join our channel for more stories that remind us love transcends all boundaries, that second chances exist, and that families are built through daily choices rather than genetic lottery. Share this story with someone who needs to remember that sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is simply see someone who feels invisible. Drop a comment below and tell us about a time when someone showed up for you when others wouldn't, or when you chose to be the person who sees what others miss. Your story matters, and together we can build a community where kindness isn't just a story we tell, but a life we live. Thanks for watching, and remember, you never know whose life you might change just by choosing to care.